now. I'm with Dr. Joe Jorgensen, who is a candidate for the Libertarian Party nomination for President of the United States. And I will be asking her a series of pre-written questions that I've asked to a bunch of other candidates. I've interviewed 5 other presidential candidates so far. This may be my final interview, or I may try to get Congressman Amash on. We'll see how that goes. But I'm going to talk with her for probably about 2 hours, and I will ask my pre-written questions. Anyone from the live audience can ask questions too, which I will try to ask her time permitting at the end, unless they seem to fit into the topic we're discussing. So thank you very much for sitting down with me, Dr. Jorgensen.
Oh, absolutely. Please call me Joe. Thanks.
Okay, so let's get right into it. Tell us about your background as far as your educational history, your career history, and what political offices you've run for in the past.
So, my educational history, I actually grew up in a very small town. We had literally one red light. So, I went to a very blue collar high school, and I actually took shop class: woods, metals, plastics, mechanical drawing. So, I'm just kind of, people joke about my being an average Joe. I really am. And I went to Baylor for undergrad, and I majored in psychology. After that, I received my MBA at SMU. I then worked for IBM.
What is SMU?
Oh, I'm sorry, Southern Methodist University. It's in Dallas, Texas. And so then I worked for IBM in Texas, found myself in Greenville, South Carolina, took a few years off to be a stay-at-home mom.
What did you do for IBM?
I was a marketing representative for General Systems Division. So this was actually long before the personal computer was invented. A lot of people think, and there are a couple prominent people out there who talk about how, before IBM invented the personal computer. Actually, they didn't. It really was Steve Jobs. IBM had a smaller kind of standalone, but it was definitely not a personal computer. So when I worked for IBM, it was before the days of personal computer, and we sold the large mainframe. And for those of you in the IT world, probably System 34, System 36 will sound familiar to you. That's what I worked with. And it would have up to like 34 stations, even remote stations. So this is back when we had, the one big standalone computer. I didn't sell the big ones that needed the air conditioning, just the ones that needed to be taken care of a little more than what we have now. So I actually did learn how to, and here's how I'm a real libertarian. I learned how to program Fortran, BASIC, and then RPG2. And in fact, I learned Fortran 4 when I was at Baylor. And I also took Greek. So we had, what used to be the little cards where you would write the program on. And the way I would memorize my Greek terminology is I was a bartender during my senior year at Baylor, and I would hang these computer cards behind my station with my Greek terms, and that's how I learned my Greek words. So then it made sense after I got my MBA that I went into something with computers. So as a marketing rep, basically salesman, but it was a little more involved than that because I was dealing with larger companies. And for instance, I don't think IBM would mention or would mind if I mentioned some of my companies, but for instance, Bell and Howell in Fort Worth was one of my companies. And I also was the representative for accountants and lawyers, and that was really interesting. So after finishing my stint at IBM, which lasted about 3 years, then I sold computer software. I started my own company in South Carolina, and I sold computer software as an independent sales rep. Then I took a few years off, stayed home with my children, although it was hard for me to sit still. So even when I was staying home with my children, what they call flipping houses now, I actually did that a couple times while my kids were little. I would be up till 3 o'clock in the morning painting and knocking down walls. And then I got back into the computer business, and I sold, well, we duplicated computer software, and I joke that we duplicated computer software legally. So we started off with the 3.5-inch floppy disks and moved to CDs. And then when we were in the CDs, and by the way, this is what I was doing when I ran for VP. I was still in the computer industry, copying the 3.5-inch floppy disks, kind of transitioning to the CDs. And then after that, I realized, okay, this is going the way of the buggy whip, because we are going into the age of the internet, and people aren't going to need to send their data through disks. So that's when I went back to school. I got a PhD in industrial organizational psychology at Clemson. And a few years later, and since this is kind of informal, and you've asked me to kind of slow down and fill in the gaps a little more, because sometimes people ask me how I got into academia, especially after having been an entrepreneur and starting a couple of companies. What happened was, after I graduated, my dissertation chair sent me an email, and in the subject line it said, "Please think about this before you say no." And he said that he was interim chair that year. They needed a lecturer, and hey, would you mind coming back and teaching? Just 1, 2, 3 classes, whatever you want. We just need help. And my reaction was, okay, fine for you. I'll make the sacrifice for you if you really want me to do this. Well, after about a month of that job, I thought, man, this is like the best job ever. So I decided that I wanted to stick around, and they said they were glad to have me. And what's ironic is, a few years later, they were hiring another lecturer, and I was surprised at how competitive it was, how many people applied for the job, and how they had to go through interviews and job talks and all that. And so then I felt very fortunate. I thought that was kind of funny, because I felt like I was doing them the favor by teaching, and I found out that no, they were doing me the favor by giving me the best job ever. So I've been doing that ever since. However, 2013, I decided to go back for additional education, as though, whatever, 3 or 4 college degrees isn't enough. And I got my MSW, which is Master's in Social Work, and also my graduate certificate in drug and alcohol addiction studies. So I got these so that I can provide therapy, because my PhD in psychology is actually more of a business PhD, not a clinical PhD.
So you needed to get a certification to do social work, or how does it work in South Carolina?
Well, how it works is, I've done my practicum, my classroom practicum, where I worked in a behavioral health center, what they used to call mental hospital. I spent a semester there. I also spent a semester doing outpatient therapy. Like I didn't actively do the therapy, but I sat in on sessions and learned. So now what I have to do is I have to do, 2,000 hours. I have to do a certain number of hours in order to get licensed. And I have a time limit of doing that. And unfortunately, the time limit is coming up. And I've been running for president instead of getting my hours in. So I'm going to have to petition the board to say, hey, sorry, I ran for president instead of getting my hours. Can you extend this? But my understanding is that people will often ask for an extension for financial reasons, personal reasons. So I'm hoping that, yes, after this is finished, that my degree will still be, by the sell-by date.
It almost makes you want to oppose occupational licensing restrictions.
Well, and can I add, and that's what's so crazy is I've got a PhD in psychology. And yet, I am not allowed by law in South Carolina to refer to myself as a psychologist, even though I have a PhD in psychology and I teach psychology at an almost top 20 university. So, but if I lived back in my home state of Illinois, I could call myself a psychologist just because I have the PhD. So, different states have different rules. And it just so happens that I'm in the state with, probably one of the strictest rulings. But yeah, if you look at the licensing, it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So absolutely, it would be nice to have a libertarian world in which we didn't have that. But I just realized I didn't finish answering your other question. As far as running for office, I ran for U.S. Congress in 1992, and that was a very long race. I mean, I think I ran for a year and a half, 2 years. I did really put a lot of effort into that. And then it was after that race that somebody called me and said, we think you did a great job running for Congress. Would you consider running for the VP nomination? And I thought, yeah, that'd actually be fun. And so that led me to the 96 VP nomination with Harry Brown.
So when you say someone called you, was that someone affiliated with the Brown campaign or just a libertarian in general?
No, yeah, it was just a libertarian in general. And I don't even remember who it was. But I do remember asking a few of my libertarian friends, what do you think? And they said, oh, we think you'd be a great candidate. No, Harry Brown never endorsed me. Never supported me. He was being, a good libertarian and saying, okay, this choice is up to the libertarian, up to the delegates. They can choose whoever they like. And that's one of the reasons why I don't have a running mate is I'm not going to tell the delegates, this is who I think you need to vote for. And I have had a few people ask me that. And if I get the nomination, what I would do is I would say, hey, here's 4 or 5 great people I think would be great to have on the ticket, but I'm not going to handpick somebody and say, okay, this is the person you need to vote for. Because first of all, libertarians don't usually do what you tell them to anyway. We're very independent thinkers. But secondly, I just want them to make that choice. I don't want them to think that I think I can do a better job than they can. So
you talked about your career history and so forth, but within that rubric, what executive or managerial experience do you have that you think would make you more qualified to be the actual president and manage the large executive branch relative to other candidates?
Okay, yeah. As far as managerial experience. So when I said I had a company that duplicated disk software, my business partner and I had about 25 people working for us. And the company made over $2 million a year, which now it doesn't sound like much, but this is early 90s. So now we're talking probably like a $5 million company. So I was in charge of a good sized company, 25 employees. So absolutely, I have that experience. In addition, I've got the MBA from SMU. And most importantly, I've got the industrial organizational psychology degree, which a lot of people aren't familiar with. It deals with topics such as leadership, motivation, teamwork, performance appraisals, and so forth. And I can tell you that there are a lot of executives out there, a lot of people running companies who really don't have the best practices. There are some really interesting things. If you don't mind my sharing one, and this is actually pretty recent research. So if you think about the kind of employee you want, of course, most people want somebody who's conscientious, right? That is and research shows that conscientious employees tend to be the better employees. They're reliable, dependable, they show up on time, they do what they're supposed to do. It turns out, though, when you're putting a team together, let's say you've got a team of 5 people, you do not want all 5 people to be conscientious, because you put 5 conscientious people on a team together and nothing gets done, because everybody wants to, well, let's wait, let's make sure it really works, well, let's double check this, and everybody's a devil's advocate. Nothing gets done. You actually want a few, I'm not going to say reckless, but a few people who are like, let's just get this done. So what might be good in one person is not as good if you have a group of 5 people. So, and let me mention, I also do consulting on the side in this business consulting. My company's name is Performance Minds. Although my main job is teaching, I also do some of that consulting. So, I can say that even though I haven't run a Forbes, 500 company, I've got a lot of the knowledge that even some people don't have.
Why are you running for president?
As I always say, because government is too big, too nosy, too intrusive, too bossy. And this is the worst part, is it often hurts the people that they say they're trying to help. Government is involved in everything, and they just make things worse. If we go back to a free society and allow people to make their own choices, we will be much better off. And added to that, right now, it's very frustrating to see, for instance, and the one that gets me the most is healthcare. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, well, obviously the free market didn't work, so we need single payer system or something. Well, no, we don't have a free market. And here's why. And here's why you don't want to go to single payer system. So I've done a lot of research on that. And I think that I would be a good person to bring that message to people and explain how the libertarian method is the best way to go.
That ties into my next question. What are your top 3 issues as a candidate? And can you talk a bit about each one?
Oh, absolutely. So as I just said, well, let me give you the list real quick to keep people out of suspense. Healthcare is definitely one. Also, bringing the troops home, and last, the environment. So I'd like to continue with the healthcare one. So there are so many reasons that we don't have the good system that we have. First of all, I'd like to point out that out of all of the industrialized world, we are the only country that has healthcare tied to employment. And that makes absolutely no sense at all. And again, this is one more example of how government tries to fix something, and instead they cause 5 other problems. What had happened was during World War II and immediately afterwards, companies were having a hard time getting quality employees because they had a wage and price freeze control. So rather than, so basically they couldn't say, hey, come work for our company, we'll pay you a higher rate. We'll give you raises however often. They couldn't do that. So what they had to do was they had to figure out a way to get around the dictatorial government system. So what they did instead was they started offering benefits. So that's why they started offering health care. And I believe it was Kaiser who first did it. Like it was first the people who were related to the healthcare industry, and then everybody started doing it. It's like, yeah, well, we want the best employees too. We're not allowed to raise our wages, so okay, we'll offer health care. And then it just became so entrenched in the system because right now the companies get a tax break for it, which tax breaks are good. The problem is that people without health insurance, it's hard, they can't compete to get health insurance because they don't get the tax breaks and they don't get the volume discounts that larger companies get. And I'd like to point out, so when I started the campaign, some people who were kind of in my inner circle told me, oh, you don't want to tackle healthcare. It's just too complex. It's too complicated. You can't explain it to people. You need to just stick with abolish the FDA. Well, after I was in the third party debate in which there was a socialist on stage, and I kept going back to healthcare, and another thing, my campaign finally said, okay, you're right. First of all, yes, you can explain it in terms that people can understand, but also they said, you're just so passionate about this. Absolutely, you got to keep talking about it. But I'd like to mention what I talked about on the stage, which was the socialist, and there was more than one socialist, or there was somebody from the Socialism Party, but then the guy sitting next to me was a member of the Green Party, and which is basically socialism. And in fact, he kept denouncing the socialist candidate for not being socialist enough. So anyway, one of the socialists was saying, we've got to get profit out of the healthcare. Right now, doctors just do stuff for profit, and we got to get rid of that. To which, when it came around to my turn, I said that the only parts of healthcare that have gone down in price while giving us better quality are cosmetic surgery and LASIK surgery. And why is that? Because those are the only two that are, that are widely used that insurance does not pay for. So the people pay for it directly. So I said, you better hope that doctors want profits, because guess what? The only way you ever get a profit is if you offer the best quality for the lowest price. If you don't have the best quality for the lowest price, you don't get profits and you go out of business. And that's the way it should be. So what we need to do is we need to extend that, the cosmetic surgery and LASIK model, to the rest of it. And we need to do that by having real insurance. The problem now is we don't have real insurance. And again, since we can talk longer, and I love these longer podcasts because then I can tell a little bit about my history, some things that I find interesting that maybe other people would find interesting, because by the time you get into these debates, you get 90 seconds and you can't really say much. But when I ran for U.S. Congress, and this was, close to 30 years ago, one of the best libertarian brochures I ever saw was something called, the title was Blue Car, Blue Truck, as in Blue Cross Blue Shield. And they talked about, wouldn't this be a great system for car insurance? So the car insurance will pay your gas, pay your oil, pay for your car washes. And by the way, anytime you want to go get gas, you just pay the deductible. So guess what? You don't hunt for the cheapest gas. You get to go to the most expensive gas station. The one that, maybe serves you lobster while they're out there filling up your car. Oh, but guess what? You don't even know what the most expensive gas stations are because they don't tell you ahead of time, because that's the way it is in the healthcare industry. So in the car insurance business, you only collect on a claim if you're in a car accident. It's not prepaid car expenses like prepaid, let's get gasoline, let's get another car wash. It's only for unexpected if you're in an accident. If that's the way health insurance were, it would be so much cheaper. Just one more analogy between the two. Imagine if every time you went to get gas, you had to give the attendant your insurance card, and then they had to fill it out in triplicate and send it off to the insurance company, get it approved, and then they pay them back. And I mean, it's much cheaper just to pay for the gas yourself. So why can't checkups be like this? Why can't routine minor things be like that? And I went through a period, maybe 15 years ago, where I actually didn't have health insurance. And I shouldn't be saying this. Well, first of all, luckily we had nothing truly catastrophic happen. Now, my husband was sick. We didn't know why, and we had to pay for a CAT scan and that stuff out of pocket. But even doing that, we came out ahead than if we had paid insurance. And I was just shocked at, basically the way the system was run. And if all you do, if instead of paying your expensive health insurance, if all you do is pay the few things yourself, you come out ahead. Unless something happens, like you have cancer or you break your leg, you need some kind of major surgery. Well, that's like being in a car accident. So if we only had the catastrophic type of insurance, and it's funny how people call it catastrophic insurance. I call it real insurance, because it's not insurance if all you're doing is prepaying planned, regular, knowing expenses.
So that was one of your issues. You had two more you wanted to discuss, which was the environment and...
Yeah, and I wanted to make sure that, if you don't mind, let me just mention a couple more with healthcare.
Of course.
The one that especially, two things that a lot of people don't know that is hurting us with the virus. First of all, there's something called certificate of need. You can't just build a hospital or go buy another MRI machine or really do anything without getting approval from the government. The government has to tell you, yes, it's okay for you to have an MRI because, oh, the community needs an MRI. Well, free market, what other industry do we do that in? Imagine if McDonald's, for instance, imagine there's a McDonald's, and imagine in order for Burger King to build a Burger King store across from McDonald's, they had to show certificate of need. We really think that more people want to eat hamburgers at this location. So, we're going to fill out all this paperwork, go through years of approval by the government. No, they build their hamburger stand, and if people don't want it, then it goes out of business. So we've artificially held down the number of clinics and hospitals. We've also artificially held down the number of doctors and nurses because the doctors, through the force of government, control how many doctors graduate each year. And I'd like to point out, so many people have pointed out in the past that if there's a recession, they always talk about, and usually they talk about English, English PhDs. I remember reading this Wall Street Journal article once saying how English PhDs were going to be driving taxi cabs. This was before Uber. Well, you never hear about medical doctors having to drive taxi cabs. Why is that? Because the doctors limit how many other doctors can become doctors. Imagine if everybody could do that. If school teachers could limit how many people get an education degree, or if plumbers can limit how many people become plumbers, and you can just keep charging people really high rates. So, and I realize, yes, there are plumbers unions and licensing. So to some degree that is happening, but not to the degree that we see in medicine. So if we didn't have the government artificially holding down supply, then we wouldn't have the government saying, hey, you got to stay home because we don't have enough hospitals and doctors and nurses to treat everybody. Well, why don't you? Because of what you've already done. Once again, it's like the wage and price freeze control back in World War II. The second thing that I mentioned that was important about the virus is a lot of people don't realize that around 1962, the FDA, which had been an onerous, federal agency, became even more onerous when they said, okay, up until 1962, you only had to prove that your drug was safe, and that was it. After 1962, now you got to prove not only is it safe, but also that it's effective, that it actually does what you say it will do. So now what happens, we talk about how there aren't as many drugs being brought to the market. Well, yeah, because it takes like $1 billion for each drug, because you've got to go through what they call the gold standard in medicine, RCTs, randomized controlled trials. You have to have your experimental group, your control group, and show beyond a shadow of a doubt that, yes, this drug does what it will do. Again, why not let the free market do that? So what we ended up with the virus is we've got over 60 companies making testing kits. The FDA approves 2 of them. Just 2. Meanwhile, all these other testing kits, instead of being used in America on Americans, those are going all over the world, helping other people in other countries. Other people in other countries are getting quick tests like that, and meanwhile, we're waiting. So, of course, we need to abolish the FDA, but in the meantime, what President Trump should have done was immediately said, okay, we're getting rid of the efficacy requirement. If you want to test for safety, fine, but we can't be slowed down with the efficacy. So there are just so many problems in the healthcare, and that's just kind of touching on most of them, except for one last statistic, which is the more you have a third-party payer paying for your healthcare, the more prices are going to go up, because you never spend other people's money as well as you spend your own money. And that's been shown over and over and over. And people say, well, but don't the insurance companies want to hold down costs? No. I mean, of course, they deny claims. They have to hold down some short-term costs. But the only way for an insurance company to get bigger and more profitable is by actually paying out more claims. So then the following year, they collect more in insurance premiums and so forth. So no, it is in the best interest for insurance companies for healthcare costs to go up year after year after year. So the only way to do it is a free market system where instead of having an insurance company pay for our gas, we're the ones who shop around town and we find the ones who have the cheapest gas stations for the quality that we want. Okay, so that's healthcare. Second thing, bring our troops home. I want to turn America into one giant Switzerland, armed and neutral. So a lot of people look at this as being possibly a pacifist. No, I'm saying armed. And I'm also saying neutral. Unfortunately, we've got the United States in wars all around the country. I'm sorry, not around the country, around the world. We are propping up foreign dictators. We are dying for other regimes. And also, we're paying for other people's military expense. Why shouldn't wealthy Europe pay for their own defense? There's no reason why France can't pay for France's military, Germany can't pay for Germany's military, and so forth. You know, if we look at why we can't compete, for instance, in manufacturing and other industries with other companies or other countries around the world. Well, maybe if we weren't paying their military expenses, maybe if they were paying their own, we could compete with them. So we need to bring our troops home. And the important thing about the military is, what's the number one purpose of the military? To keep us safe. That's their number one job. Keep us safe. Unfortunately, when we've got a military that's going all around the world, they are making us less safe. Just look at 9/11. Now, with bin Laden, and let me give a disclaimer because I want to make sure there's no misunderstanding here. So with bin Laden, he would point out to his followers, hey, look, notice the Americans said they were only going to be here for, and I forgot, we said we were going to be in Afghanistan temporarily, but we would go over there and we'd say we're going to be there just this short of a time. And then we'd stay there longer. And bin Laden would point out, oh, look, they said they would be gone by whatever date. Hey, they're still here. And then he would say, look, and the Americans lied about this. They told us this, that's wrong. And he kept pointing to his followers, America just lies, lies, lies. And that's how he got a following. And the next thing we know, we got planes running into the World Trade Center. Again, that does not justify it. There's no justification for what bin Laden did. What I'm saying was America did enough that he could point to it with truth to gain a following. And unfortunately, it worked. And I'd also like to point out that we've heard so many years, we've heard from the Bushes, both Bushes for so many years, oh, Saudi Arabia loves us. No, the royal family of Saudi Arabia loves our ruling class in the White House because they give them stuff. But the general people, the everyday people in Saudi Arabia don't love Americans, as we can see that most of the hijackers came from Saudi Arabia. So it is not what is being portrayed to us. I guess I could keep going on that. Do you have any other questions on?
Well, you had a third issue, I think was the environment that you wanted to talk about.
Okay. I wasn't sure if you wanted me to continue with one giant Switzerland. Well, actually,
you can talk about that if you want, however you want to.
Okay, I just was going to wait to see if you had any specific questions. So I would like to add, let me add a personal story, which you may have heard of on, I've mentioned this, I think, in one or two debates. And this is just a demonstration of what we've heard, which is when goods cross borders, soldiers don't. And you can kind of flip it around. If soldiers aren't crossing borders, then goods can cross borders. So in the early 80s, and this is when I was working for IBM, by the way, I was parked in a grocery parking lot, and this older gentleman kind of walked up to me and he was glaring at me and I couldn't figure out why. I thought, I'm not, you know, I don't think I cut you off in traffic. I mean, I'm kind of a fast driver, but I thought I was, you know, being a nice driver. And he's getting closer and closer to being glaring at me. And he mentions to me, he finally gets close enough and he says, I was in World War II. And how dare you drive that Italian car? I had a Fiat Spitfire. And he said, how dare you drive that car from Italy, you know, after what they did to us. And I didn't want to get into an argument with him. And I mean, he's a veteran and he, you know, he served his country, he served my country. And so the last thing I want to do is get into an argument with a veteran. But what I wanted to do is explain to him, well, see, here's the thing. If we're buying cars from Italy, guess what? They're probably not going to bomb us. You tend to not bomb your best customers. So, so by having peace and neutrality, we can have great relations where we trade. And of course, no tariffs, no sanctions, no embargoes, none of that, where we trade freely. And by trading freely, now we don't have to worry about being at war at each other, because why would you want to be at war with your best customer? Okay, so the third topic
But
is
let me interject real quick with a story of my own, which is my dad fought in World War II, and
okay.
and similar to you, I had that sort of experience. I was watching an Iron Chef on TV, invited a bunch of my friends to watch a big special. I wanted to hang a Japanese flag outside my house, and my dad would have none of it. He said the Japanese killed a whole bunch of my friends. We're not putting a Japanese flag in front of our house. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, when you fight in a war like that, I guess it sticks with you for a while. But yeah, your insight
Oh,
seems to be from Bastia, where if goods
yep.
don't cross borders, armies will.
Yep.
Anyway, I'm
Exactly.
sorry for the interruption. Let's
Oh
continue.
no, thank you, thank you. Because I feel like I'm doing a monologue up here. In fact, when I teach, I always start each semester by telling my students, I really don't want to be up here and be like Ben Stein and Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and you know, class, where I'm just doing all the talking. So please, let's kind of interact and talk to me. Oh, by the way, fun fact: if you know who Ben Stein is, not only is he an actor in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, he's also an economist. And he apparently has a house in Greenville, South Carolina, where I live. People have said that, yes, they've seen him around town and he really likes the place. And one of my students said that his mom or dad or somebody was a realtor and he was looking for a house here. So, so the third one is the environment. And I'd like to point out, and I think my having the environment shows one way of many of how my campaign is different from most of the other candidates, which is what libertarians have tended to do. And by the way, I did this when I ran for US Congress. What we tend to do is we tend to pick issues that we get excited about and we talk about. But the problem is a lot of times they're not the issues that excite the voters. And something that libertarians usually don't have as part of their platform is the environment. And you know, many different reasons why. And I'm not sure exactly why libertarians don't get excited about it. But one of the reasons may be just it's kind of simple workings. I mean, you look around the world and where there's more freedom, there's less pollution. You know, where there's less pollution, there's more freedom. It's kind of like end of story. But here's the thing. Right now, especially young people are really excited about the environment. And the environment is one of their top issues. And if we are going to bring in young people, especially, we need to talk about what excites them, not what excites us. And so, and by the way, yes, I do care about the environment. I don't want to get you wrong about that. And I compost, you know, I'm a gardener and I compost my food scraps and I recycle and all that stuff. But I'm actually making a point of it to have it be one of my top 3 issues, so that one of the complaints we hear about libertarians is, oh, they're for the big corporations or whatever. And I want to show how no, libertarians are for the individual, for individual liberty, individual responsibility. So yeah, absolutely, there are corporations who are getting away with polluting. But guess what? They can only do that through big government. So it's a great example of big government. And we're using it as a teaching tool to explain to the newer generation coming up why they need to take a look at our party. And one of the things I've been talking about is nuclear power. And this is just a great example of libertarianism, and once again, how the government doesn't work. Because first of all, when people hear nuclear power, they get a little nervous. They think about the old generation nuclear power, and they say, well, but what about the nuclear waste, and isn't it dangerous? And look at the the meltdowns. But here's the thing, two things. One thing is, when the technology came out, decades ago, what happened was the government is the one who looked at all the choices out there and said, okay, we're choosing this choice. And by the way, the choice was to take water and cool it, to cool it above ground, even though it was originally meant for submarines in the water. So the government picked one system that was not the best system and ran with it. We don't need to make that mistake again. And the example I give for that is, imagine if when computer technology was first being developed, and we've got IBM, we've got Bill Gates, we've got Steve Jobs, we've got Apple, all these other companies. And imagine the federal government goes, okay, you, Bill Gates, we're picking your computer. Steve Jobs, you can just go away. We don't need Apple. We're using this. That's essentially what happened. And that is why we had such low quality, is because we didn't have the free market competition. We didn't have people competing for the best quality for the lowest price. Well, the good news is that's what we're seeing now. We're seeing what's called advanced. Some people call it fourth generation, but whatever. We've got new technology. The reactors that they're building are about 1/10 the size as the old ones. And there are many different companies coming up with different size reactors. For instance, Rolls-Royce is one of the companies coming up with it. And if we just have the government stay out of it and let the free market continue to decide which one is the best, and let the companies who do a poor job, let them go out of business. They're supposed to go out of business. And again, that was what I tried to emphasize at the debate with the third party debate with the socialist, which is profit is good. Profit will tell us who is giving us the best quality for the best price. If you can't do that, then you shouldn't be in business. So I'm looking forward to seeing what these companies who are competing against each other can come up with to replace the old, outdated, government-sanctioned technology.
Yeah, so I've been reading up on this technology too. It looks like they're coming up with thorium reactors, molten salt. So a lot of new technologies out there that are a lot safer than uranium, at least from their
Yes.
early testing. So I guess let's move on to the next question. So those were the two really open-ended questions. The other questions will probably be faster, but we'll see. So I'm sure that okay, let me go to this first. How would you describe the libertarian philosophy to a voter unfamiliar with libertarians?
Well, it would depend on who the voter is. And I think one thing that libertarians don't do is we don't ask enough questions, and we don't tailor our answer to people based on who they are. So it would depend, am I talking to a Democrat? Am I talking to a Republican? Am I talking to an independent? What are their issues? What are they most important? What are they most interested in? What do they think the biggest problems are? Do they think government is too big, too small, or just about right? So I would tailor it to whatever group I'm talking to. And again, that's one thing that our earlier 1970s messages tended to be, it's my money, it's my body, I can do what I want with it. And I can tell you that that message usually doesn't work. We have to show the benefits, and we have to show how we can help them. So it would depend on who I was talking with, and I would just ask that person. My first question, excuse me, would be, is government too big, too small, or just about right? And if somebody says, nope, government's too small, we need bigger government, I might spend my time somewhere else. Although what I try to do is, you know, part of the problem that we've seen, for instance, with the Bernie Sanders movement, is people look at Bernie Sanders and they see that, they think, oh, he's for the little guy, right? And my response, and sometimes I walk by these tables on campus, and I thought, oh my gosh, what am I going to say? Because keep in mind I'm an instructor, so I have to keep this, you know, I have to keep this at a good, I can't use my power to seem like I'm trying to use my power for undue influence, and put it that way. So I thought, geez, what do I do if a Bernie Sanders supporter stops me? Because I would go by these tables every day. And I finally decided that my answer would be, no, I could never be a Bernie supporter fan because I believe in the little guy. I don't think that we should have a big government telling everybody what to do. And I know that would probably kind of be like a what, kind of like any Bernie Sanders supporter would probably say, "What are you talking about?" No, we are he thinks the little guy should come out ahead, and just to kind of open up a dialogue of explaining how no, that system is one in which we have a big government telling all the rest of us how to act. So it depends, but you can throw out some examples for me if you like.
Well, I sort of left that up to you, but it sounds like you approach the question. This is something Jim Lark told me, Dr. Lark, who
Yes.
is our current regional representative, and I think
Yes.
he heard it from Marshall Fritz, which is my favorite food is strawberries, but when I go fishing, I use worms. Because
Yes.
the fish like the worms better than the strawberries. So it sounds like you're tailoring your message to the audience rather than to your own personal preferences. So I
Yes.
guess you talked about.
Oh, and do you mind if I interject
Go
there?
ahead.
Yeah, first of all, yeah, Jim Lark, one of my favorite people. He's great. Also, Marshall Fritz, one of my favorite people. He's great. I actually went to an Advocates for Self-Government retreat in Georgia, gosh, in the 90s. It was like one of the best weekends of my life. It was just wonderful. So I just can't speak highly enough for the Advocates for Self-Government. So, and yeah, when we lost Marshall Fritz, that was a big loss for the movement. So thank you. I'd forgotten about that quote. Thank you for reminding me. That's great. So
So
yes, that's my philosophy. Exactly.
so tying that into what you said, i- when you talked about the 1970s approach to messaging, it sounded more like a natural rights approach to libertarianism,
Right.
whereas you think that utilitarian consequentialist looking at outcomes appeals more to much of the public. Would that be a accurate way of saying that,
Well,
or you would convey it
yeah,
differently?
I don't like to use the word utilitarian because that often implies two things, which is number one, what's best for the common good, like what's best for everybody in general. And also it implies that rights don't matter. But I guess you could say that I use that as an approach, but I would, I still, I would never say, for instance, well, we've got to just give up our right for this to happen. So I might use utilitarian, put it this way, I might use utilitarian as a questioning approach, but not so much a final answer, because I would never put it in terms of, sacrificing individuals for the greater majority.
Okay. So I'm sure you're familiar with the Libertarian Party platform. Is there
Yep.
any plank in the party platform that you disagree with? And if so, which ones and why?
Well, um, I'll, I'll at the risk, and again, my campaign. This is the one thing where they tell me maybe I shouldn't be so vocal. And first of all, let me say yes, I will support. As candidate, it is my job to support every single plank, and I think as a minimum, anybody we have represent us, we can't go around saying, yes, we believe there should be an IRS, or yes, we believe that we should station our troops around the world. That's just not what we believe. But the one thing, and I mentioned this in the South Carolina debate, and I got asked about it again because I guess word got out. I wish that our party would eliminate the abortion plank. And let me quickly add, real quick, I'm not saying we should become pro-life. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying I wish that we didn't talk about it pro or con, because yes, there is an argument to be made the other way. I mean, if you think about it, if every libertarian agreed when life started, we would 100% agree on the abortion plank, because libertarians believe in life. But some libertarians believe life starts here, and some libertarians believe life starts here. So if we agreed on the premise, we would agree on the plank. But here's the problem. And yes, I mentioned this in the Mises caucus last night, which is that I can't tell you how many not libertarians, but how many, would-be libertarians, how many people I've talked with who say, oh, you're right, government's too big. Oh, you're right, they take too much of our money. Oh, you're right. Yeah, we need to stop sending our armies all over the world. And then they say, but I can't be a libertarian because I'm pro-life. And they don't even say, well, I would just feel uncomfortable becoming a libertarian because I know they don't even say that. They say I can't, because I know that our party, we do give the impression, and by the way, I do agree, if we have major candidates running, I do think they need to be at 100, 100. I believe the standard bearers do need to be at 100, 100. But we're never going to grow if we don't bring in people who are 90, 90, 80, 80, 70, 70. Two reasons. First of all, we're never going to grow if we have like an entrance exam that you have to pass the exam to be in the party. And secondly, here's what happens is people who join the party who are maybe 60, 40, 70, 70, what happens is they join the party and they hear the reasons for other planks. And they go, now that makes sense. And in fact, I was at, the Florida State Convention, and I spoke with someone who said, yeah, when I joined the Libertarian Party, I was only 60, 60, 70, 70 at the most. I was nowhere near the top. But just being a member of the party and hearing people talk and reading and finding out different views, I became a 100, 100. And guess what? I was on the LNC for 2 terms. So we shouldn't be telling people you need to be 100, 100 before you come in. And just keep the people out there, because oftentimes they're not going to be 100, 100 until we join us. So what happens is we give the impression to people, you cannot be a libertarian. We do not want you if you're pro-life. And all I have to do is point back to Ron Paul. I mean, Ron Paul, I think, was a great candidate. And what if Ron Paul had said, you know what, I'm pro-life, they don't want me, I'm not going to be a part of the Libertarian Party. I think that would have done our party and our movement a great disservice, because I think that he has done a good job in spreading liberty to other people. And the fact that, he's a medical doctor, got a wife, got kids, and he's showing the average person that, hey, you can be a family guy with a libertarian, because unfortunately, because of our background, unfortunately, a lot of people out there have the misconception, oh yeah, libertarians, they're the ones who want to legalize heroin. And they look at us as, a bunch of people who just want to do drugs, because they don't see past that. So we've got people like Dr. Paul out there showing that, hey, Family Guy, OB-GYN, kids, wife, that just only helps our party. So I am so glad that he looked past that and joined the party anyway. But unfortunately, it's keeping a lot of other people out. And I'd like to point out, a lot of Catholics belong to the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is very pro-choice, and Catholics are very pro-life. And if somehow they've worked out an agreement to which Catholics can become Democrats, why can't we have some of these people in the Libertarian Party, especially if they're 90, 100, or 190, whatever it works out to be, because they are because they're libertarian in every other manner, except for perhaps this one thing which doesn't go along with the platform.
So I want to clarify something, but my audience isn't all Libertarian Party delegates or Old Faithful.
Okay.
So there are some confused people. When you're talking 100, 100, or 90, 60, they didn't know what that means. So just clarify, what she's talking about is the Nolan chart, which is basically a political quiz, which sees how you feel about economic freedom and social freedom. And if you believe in 100% social freedom and 100% economic freedom, then you are at the top of the diamond and you would be identified as a libertarian. And I'll try to put a link in the chat for what the Nolan chart is. But I don't know if you wanted to talk about the Nolan chart at all, or we could just move on to your next question if that's enough.
I'd love to. So because I would like to correct another misconception. And I'm so glad you've got so many non-libertarians out there. So when I first joined the party, what we used to do is we used to tell people, okay, what we do is we take the best of the Republicans and the best of the Democrats and combine them together. We say, you know what? The Republicans or the right, they give us economic freedom. They tell us that we should be able to run our business how we want to. We should be able to pay our people what we want to. We should be able to own guns. And just generally do with our money with what we want to. That we should be the ones to decide how to spend our money, not government. That bureaucrats never spend money as well as individuals do. And then I go back to my healthcare thing. The left, we say, what Democrats have right is the idea that we should all be able to live our lives how we want to. That yes, gays should be able to get married. That yes, people should have the right to say what they want. That we should have free speech. We should be able to voice our opinions. And so what we say is that on the right, and it depends on how you do it, whether it's 0, 100 or 100, 0. But basically, if you've got the Republicans, they're all the way on a scale of 0 to 100. They're 100 on economic freedoms. The Democrats, 0 to 100, they're 100 on social freedoms, social decisions, but not on business. And so we say we're 100, 100. We take the best of both worlds. So I thought that was a pretty good explanation without showing the chart. But here's the problem. You can't say that anymore because Democrats no longer believe in personal freedom. They're the biggest censors out there. They're the ones saying you can't say this, you can't say that. And now we've got Republicans who are saying, no, you can't run your business how you want to. We've seen Republicans repeatedly raise taxes, increase spending, and even somebody like Ronald Reagan, who Republicans mistakenly think he gave us smaller government every year. No, he didn't. He gave us bigger government. Yes, he cut taxes, but the more important thing, yes, cutting taxes is important, but what's even more important is to cut spending. And by cutting taxes, more money came in, and so they just spent more. And you look at 8 budgets in his tenure, 4 and 4, the 2 terms, spending went up every single year of the 8 years, every single year.
Great. Well, not great. The spending went up, but a great explanation. So let's get back to the questions. How many state conventions have you visited in person, and how many have you addressed remotely in your race for this presidential nomination?
Oh my gosh, I'd have to get my calendar to look. I mean, before
Well,
the shut,
ballpark, I guess.
yeah, I couldn't even guess. I mean, I was going. Sometimes I go to three conventions in one weekend, and I started. Well, I went to the South Carolina convention in November, and then we were off and running in January. So you go from January till mid March when we were shut down, two or three conventions every weekend. I think there was one convention. I think it was Missouri and Florida where I spoke, got on the plane, went to Florida, spoke there. So yeah, so many. Um, I was somewhere every weekend, at least one, if not two or three conventions. And since then, I was in the Kentucky debates. I was one of the top three for the first round, so I got moved on to the next round. Which, by the way, I don't know if you noticed, I came in second after Justin Amash in the final Kentucky debate, and I went to the North Carolina convention. Yeah, I'd have to sit down and look at all the state conventions that I went to. But in addition to conventions, I've been talking to groups too. So, for instance, shout out to the Wake County, North Carolina people. They were great. They had a meeting and they invited me to be there. I was just with in Delaware. I believe it was Newcastle. I was in a meeting with them on Friday, and that was great. So I've been going just to general meetings in addition to the debates, such as the Mises Caucus, and then Saturday was Kentucky. And I will be in the Texas debate. In fact, out of everybody who qualified for the Texas debate, because Mark Whitney dropped out, my campaign actually, out of the remaining people, my campaign came in first for that one.
Great. Yeah, I did see the debate results. That seems to indicate that you're a compromise candidate for a lot of people. That even if you're not their first choice, you may be their second choice. And the way libertarian voting works at the convention is you need a majority. So
Right.
so we will eliminate the lowest vote getter and vote again and vote again and vote again. So
Yeah,
uh,
and I think that's because, first of all, I do follow the platform plank by plank by plank. I'm not out there promoting any non-libertarian idea, like leaving the income tax, leaving the IRS, leaving troops around the world. I'm straight down the line libertarian, but I'm not going out there saying it's my money, it's my body. Deal with it. I'm going out there. Okay, this is how I can explain to soccer moms. This is how liberty can work best for you, as opposed to using a 1970s type approach.
so let's talk about your campaign infrastructure. Who's your campaign manager?
It is now Steve Dasbach. He started out as my campaign chair, and he's now my campaign manager. And and he's been with me pretty much since day one, since the weekend of the first debate at South Carolina. And for those of you who don't know who Steve Dasbach is, I mean, I could not be more honored that he's my campaign manager. There's nobody I would rather have. He was executive director, and he was national chair of the Libertarian Party. He held both positions in the 1990s. So he was party leadership. He led the party when Harry Brown and I were running for president and vice president. So one of the things I always point to is that Harry and I had the largest increase in party membership. We doubled the party in those 2 years, 95, 96. And so Steve was a part of the National Party during that time. So this is really exciting to have the people, and along with him, let me add Joe Hauptman, who had helped me with my VP campaign and has been on LNC and all that. He still holds the record for the most number of votes for a U.S. congressional race when it's, Democrat, Republican, Libertarian. Of course, if you're only going to run against one, you're going to get a higher vote total. And I've also got Stuart Flood working with me, which is really exciting because he's been he was state chair of my state party for, I don't know, 10 years. But before that, he was a Republican. And so he's worked in the inner workings of the Republican circles. So he knows a lot of campaign stuff, a lot of campaign tactics that we don't know. So I am just so happy to have them on staff. And also, I've got a couple people who advise us who also were working with the National Party back during the Harry Brown days. So that, like I said, party membership is growth. Well, we haven't really gone into that talking with you, but this is something I've been repeatedly saying, which is we have to grow the party.
Do you have a coordinator in all 50 states?
No, I couldn't tell you. That's something that and I'm sorry. So they switched positions. Joe Hauptman used to be my campaign manager, and now he's my campaign chair. What I try to do is I try to pretty much stick to candidate stuff and allow them to do organization. So I really couldn't tell you how many state coordinators we have. But if you're in a state and you would like to be state coordinator, let my campaign know. But I probably should have a better answer than that, but I don't.
How much money has your campaign raised so far?
I should know that too, shouldn't I?
Do you have a ballpark, even if you're not sure of an exact number?
I don't know. Oh gosh, I don't want to give the wrong answer. Again, this is
okay. We can move on. So where can people find out more about your campaign? So your website, your social media, etc.
Yes, thank you. It's joj2020.com. Again, joj2020.com. What it is it's Joe J, my first name, last initial, and then 2020. And it is .com.
Great. And on Facebook, Twitter, so etc. Where can people find you there?
Again, Joe Jorgensen for president. Now, I did open up a campaign, like my own personal Facebook recently, but you want to go to the campaign one where it's got the banner, the Joe Jorgensen for president one. And then I am on Twitter. I can't tell you how to find me. I'm sorry. But again, Joe Jorgensen for president should get you there.
So tell me about your social media plan. Which sites do you have a campaign presence on beyond Facebook and Twitter? And how much of a following do you have on these various sites?
Oh, I've got a great person who's handling that, Caitlin, and she just put on a Think Liberty debate a few weeks ago. Again, I can't tell you how many followers I have. All I know is she's been doing a great job with bringing more people on board. We have an Ask Me Anything on Friday that she's been coordinating lately. And
with Reddit, is that, or Ask Me Anything, or is
yes,
that a Reddit thing? Okay.
Yeah, Ask Me Anything. Well, it's on Facebook. I do it on Facebook.
Oh, on Facebook. Okay.
Yeah, I do it on Facebook. So for instance, and anytime we have any kind of debate going on or anything like that, she's always really good about getting the message out to people.
What is Caitlin's last name that was asked in the chat?
Oh yeah, Cloven, Cloven.
Oh, okay.
I think I'm spelling it correctly.
Yeah. Okay. So will you be supporting 58 ballot access with your campaign resources?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, that's something that, so I just to make sure, it's her last name is spelled Cloven, and her first name is Caitlin, Caitlin. I know there's many different ways to spell Caitlin, so I thought I would.
Yeah, I just asked because someone in chat asked if it was a different Caitlin and provided a different last name. It's not her, so okay.
So I think that 50 state ballot access is very important. And I was very proud in 1996 to be on the ballot in all 50 states, because that's one thing that sets us apart from the other third parties. And, when I was in the third party debate in 96 with the Green Party and whoever else was there, is most of these groups are only on the ballot in what, 10, 20, 30 states. We are really the only major, the only third party worth talking about. And one reason we can say that is we can say that because we are on the ballot in all 50 states. So we can say, hey, guess what? Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians, only parties in the entire country that you can vote for in every state. So that doesn't make us just another one of the third parties. That makes us the third party and ranks us with Democrats and Republicans. So I think that ballot access is very important. And by the way, yes, I have done some petitioning, just helping out, volunteering here and then. I haven't done that in a while. I did that back when I was running for U.S. Congress and running for president. So absolutely, I would put the money towards ballot access before I would put it in a lot of other places, because it's kind of like a yes, no. It's not a degree thing. It's not, oh, we came this close. It's like, no, you're on the ballot in 50 states or you're not. You're either a major party or you're not. So I think that that's very important.
Suppose you get the Libertarian Party nomination for president. Short of getting elected president, do you have any less ambitious goals we could use as metrics to judge the success of your campaign? For example, you're trying to maximize votes, sell books, increase party membership, or some other goal?
As far as I know, and I hate to make statements. In fact, in the Mises debate last night, one of the other candidates made a statement saying, I'm the only candidate who does this. And it was a good thing. That he said, that he did what such and such. And I actually corrected him. And I said, no, actually, you're not the only candidate. I've also done this. And luckily I had proof. I was able to point to a flyer we had handed out. So I'm a little reluctant to say, I'm the only candidate who does this. But I'm going to go out on a limb kind of and say, I'm pretty sure I'm the only candidate who's not either selling a book or head of some organization or head of some podcast or radio show or somehow doing something that would benefit me personally. I have absolutely nothing to sell. I have no, no following, no podcast that it would help me. The only reason I'm running is to help the Libertarian Party because I want to see the party get somewhere. So what I would use as a metric would be, again, membership. And yes, votes are important, especially in those states with ballot access. Some states rely on votes for ballot access. So absolutely, we have to go after the votes there. However, if we look at the numbers, Harry Brown and I only got 500,000 votes, but we brought in 8,500 members to the party, and a lot of them are still there. And that's one of the more rewarding things that I have when I went to the 2018 convention, when I met you, there were a lot of people who came up to me and said, oh, you're the one who brought me into the party. You came to my college or you came and spoke to my group. And so I'm here because of you. That is so rewarding. Flash forward, go to 2016. And again, Gary Johnson, I'm not, he ran a good campaign. I believe he is a libertarian, true, through and through. And he fought a good fight. And he did get 4 million votes, many more than Harry and I got. But he only increased the party by 7,500 members. Except for the states with ballot access in which you need votes, I think it's more important to bring in members because that's how you're going to grow the movement. You need candidates at every level, state, local, and federal level. You need to have new donors, new people knocking on doors, new people going out and speaking to groups, new people talking to their family to bring in other people. We need to start mushrooming out to get a larger party. So absolutely, votes are important, especially for ballot access, but a very close second, sometimes first, but depending on which state, would be the party membership, which I think is very important.
So do you have a plan? Does your campaign have a plan to build party membership? For example, but will your campaign be data sharing with the national party and state parties when you get new inquiries to your campaign?
Absolutely. And that's what I'm challenging Justin Amash to do. So, one thing that made my run with Harry Brown different is we gave all of our information to the national party. And that's one of the ways that we were able to grow the party. That's how we doubled the party, which, if I haven't mentioned it, largest growth in party history. We did that by working with them, by sharing data. If you look at the last three campaigns, Bob Barr and then both of Gary Johnson's campaigns, they did not share all the data. And but you have to take it a step beyond that. You can't just say, will you share the data? You've got to ask, will you share the data real time? Because my understanding is that at least one of the campaigns gave them the data, like, I don't know, a year or two later, but it still wasn't all the data. Harry Brown and I shared all the data. The last three campaigns did not share all the data. Oh, and let me quickly add, I realize I'm interrupting myself a lot, but one thing about libertarians is we're stickler for details. Me too. And so I don't want to give the wrong impression. I do not blame Gary Johnson. I blame the Republican-led campaign team, okay? I don't think Gary Johnson meant to do this, but unfortunately he had outside consultants running his campaign. And the outside consultants said they would share data and they didn't. So they shared part of the data, like a year later, but not all of it. What my campaign is pledging to do is we are pledging to share our data real time. So what does real time mean? It means that the Libertarian Party gets it immediately. That means they will have those names, those phone numbers, emails, whatever, to pass to the down ballot candidates. So if you're running for US Congress, if you're running for city council, if you're running for whatever, you are getting that information and you can build on it. You're not going to get it a year later after the campaign's over with. So we will not only share it, we will share it real time. And Joe Hauptman, who was my campaign manager at the time before they switched positions, Joe Hauptman and I went to Reno, to the LNC meeting in Reno in February, and we presented a proposal and we gave them a document. We said, here, this is our commitment to the party that we will data share with you. You will get all the information we get from the campaign. And some of the people on the committee were kind of like scratching their heads, puzzled, like, well, so wait a minute. But what do you want from us? Do we have to give you data? And we're like, nope, we're not asking for anything. We're just giving it to you in writing. We want you to understand, we think that data sharing is important and we promise to data share. And I think the only other campaign who had agreed to that at that time, or up until sometime afterwards, was the Lincoln Chafee campaign. And I don't know about the other candidates.
So just a standard question I ask is, have you sought the presidential nomination before or run as a candidate for another office? You've talked a bit about that. But in place of that, could you tell me any campaign stories people might find interesting about your run for vice president?
I think that probably, well, I did a lot of radio shows, and I think probably the one that I patted myself on the back the most over, because I was almost a detective. I was on a radio show, and of course, talking about drug legalization, how we need to legalize all drugs. But again, I don't say it's my body, I can do what I want. Instead, I say, hey, did you notice there's no alcohol store owners out there trying to sell gin to your kids in middle school because the profit's not there? Guess what? There's no people breaking into houses because they need money to buy vodka. We only hear that with illegal drugs. So I presented a very good, here are the benefits to you. Because a lot of people say, well, I don't use drugs, which I don't either. By the way, my drug of choice is bourbon, as I've mentioned. So I'm not doing this because I want to smoke pot. I'm doing this because, hey, my drug of choice is legal, so should other people's. And by the way, prohibiting drugs gives you a problem that's worse than the drug use itself. So I was on this show, And I was going through all this, and the interviewer was asking me. He was protesting and asking me questions and challenging me, but I could tell it was different for some reason, and I was just making no headway with the guy. So I finally asked him. I said, "Well, tell you what. Let me ask you. Do you think alcohol should be legal?" And he's, oh, blah, 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 blah. I'm the one asking questions, not you. And I'm like, well, but the questions you asking me are different. And it doesn't sound to me like you think anything should be legal. Do you think alcohol should be and I had to ask him a couple of times. And, I finally said, look, I think your listeners deserve to know. And finally, he admitted that he thought that alcohol should be illegal. So I said, well, tell you what, I'm glad that now your listeners know where you stand, but probably we should change the subject and talk about something else, because I don't think I'm going to convince you of drug legalization when you don't think alcohol should be legal. So, and I just had so many, uh, just the callers and their logic. There was one time when I was talking, again, it was about drugs, and I pointed out, you can't even keep drugs out of the prisons. How are you going to keep drugs out of the country? And this one caller called in and said, well, yeah, but if you keep them out of the country, then you can keep them out of the prison. So, okay. Yes, your logic works. That ain't going to happen.
When did you realize you were a libertarian?
The good news is, in time for my first, in time for the first time I voted for president, which is just coming out of college, I voted for Ed Clark in 1980. I always knew I was a little different, and if you don't mind, backing up a little, I had something happen to me in second grade, and I mentioned this at the Pennsylvania state convention. I believe it. I sometimes, they all kind of run together. So forgive me if it's a different, I'm sorry. It might have been a different convention. Anyway, we're supposed to come up, give an example of how the government did us wrong. And actually, I've stayed out of the government sites for most of my years, but I had something that happened to me in the formative years from an authoritarian person. When I was in second grade, I was in, like how they have spelling bees. Well, this was the equivalent in math, like a math bee. And we were in the front of the class, and the teacher asked us questions and we gave the answers. And I was one of the finalists. And by the way, let me add, math and science have always been my strongest subjects. And I'm really good at memorizing. So, this was a shoo-in for me to win. So I will never forget, this was the 1960s. And I was wearing this kind of bright lime green dress with big pockets, and my hands were in the pockets. Well, one of the students in class, raised his hand and, hey, teacher, Joe's got her hands in her pockets. I think she's counting and coming up with the answers by counting on her fingers, and we can't see. And the teacher said, oh, well, maybe. Well, what the teacher did is she put it before a vote. And she asked all my little fellow second graders, how many of you think Joe's cheating by counting on her fingers? Which, by the way, I wasn't. I don't have to, because I have a scary memory and I'm good at math. But she asked everybody to vote. How many of you think that Joe was cheating? And I lost. Like, they voted, and the majority ruled that I was cheating. And I just felt so, it was just, I can't tell you. I was just so crushed. And it was kind of my first idea of what we call democracy being two wolves and a sheep voting on what's for breakfast. It was something that was just not fair, and I was very upset, and it just changed my way of thinking to this isn't fair. It kind of gave me the idea that no, we don't put things up for a vote to take things away from people. So After that, I read Animal Farm, and that fit in which, granted, I didn't read Animal Farm till like a couple years later, but it kind of fit in with that really well. And I that led me down the path to libertarian thinking. Probably my first actual issue was, let me think back, high school. So when I was a freshman, this was kind of interesting. The valedictorian of the senior class was the daughter of our superintendent of the school district. So real high muckety muck up there. And remember, I was in a really small town. And in her valedictorian speech, she said something like, "Isn't it ironic or isn't it hypocritical or something? People sit there with their martinis telling other people they can't smoke marijuana." And now I was the biggest goody two shoes in high school. I've often said I somehow got through the 70s in high school and college, never even having tried marijuana. But I'm sitting there as a goody two shoes, even thinking, well, you know what? She's got a really good point. If people can drink martinis, why can't they smoke marijuana? And what was funny is, I mean, the whole town talked about it. Like I remember even my parents talking about it. The town was abuzz about this controversial thing, and it just made sense to me. And so I read Atlas Shrugged in college. And then when I heard about the Libertarian Party immediately after graduating college, well, actually, no, I was still in college, my last year there, I heard about the Libertarian Party and I said, wow, yeah, this is the party.
So how long have you been a member of the Libertarian Party? Did you join right then, or you waited a bit to join?
You know, I didn't exactly join right then. Well, first of all, I was in college and it was like, oh, I don't have a lot of money to join the party. And I went to the Dallas County Libertarian Party, which was held at this really fancy house. And I remember being somewhat intimidated. So I didn't immediately join the party, but I became active in the movement. And I don't even remember when I first joined the party. It seems like forever. But the first libertarian meeting that I went to was in 1979. And like I said, I voted for Ed Clark in 1980, and I voted for every presidential candidate since then on the Libertarian Party. I've never voted for a Democrat or Republican on the presidential ticket. And I only vote, in fact, in South Carolina, we've got, straight party ballot where you can pick all Democrat, all Republican, or all Libertarian, and then you don't have to go through, water district and all those other things. Even though sometimes there will only be 3 Libertarians on the entire ballot, I'll still go in and vote, straight Libertarian ballot. But sometimes if like Ron Paul is on the ballot, South Carolina is one of the earliest primaries. So of course I have voted for him for the Republican Party. But very, very rarely do I do that. It has to be something like that. So, yep, I've been in the Libertarian Party my whole life. And I don't even see the other 2 parties as even an option.
So have you been active in your state and county affiliates?
Yes, in fact, I was state vice chair in the early and mid 90s. I actually organized the Greenville County Party, and I was Greenville County chair. I also have handed out flyers at like downtown events. I worked at the fairgrounds with the Operation Politically Homeless, handing out the little diamonds. And I've collected signatures. I was also national marketing director for a short time in the mid 90s. And so I've been to state executive meetings recently, but I decided that I think I'm a better candidate than I am organizer. As I told you, I probably should know how much money we have. I prefer to work on the issues. I prefer to come up with other answers, doing research, doing the candidate end, as opposed to the support end. And I think I'm better at it. I think the people who are behind me in my campaign, who are doing all that for me, I think that they do a much better job than I do at that.
When you were national marketing director, who was the executive director at the time?
I remember Mary Jingle was national chair.
Okay.
I don't. Mary Jingle was the person I worked with, and the people who were prominent at the time: Mary Jingle, Joe Dean, Steve Givet. I'm trying to remember the others. So that would have been. I think that. Yeah, I'm not. It was in the '90s. I would have to go. Yeah, I'd have to
Okay.
go back.
Um, and have you ever served on the National Committee?
No, again, that's. Um, I've never even I've never even run for office because I prefer to deal with issues as opposed to the party workings. I would prefer to go out and talk to non libertarians and explain liberty to them rather than debate with people who are already libertarians.
What if you were elected president, but Congress was solidly Republican or solidly Democrat? Would you be able to enact and implement your agenda with an obstructionist Congress? Would you work with or around those who disagree with you?
Well, I would work around as much as I could. So for things that I can get rid of, I would, again, I'm pretty much down the line with probably everybody who's been a guest on your show has mentioned pardoning nonviolent drug offenders, anybody in sex work, anybody for simple weapons possession, anything like that in a federal prison, anything that I can do on my own, absolutely I will do. I would go a step beyond and tell the attorney general, hey, just you might as well just stop going after people who are breaking the drug laws because you can put somebody in jail. I'm just going to let them right out. I would do what I could to get rid of funding for instance, the Department of Education and all of that. Now, with Social Security, we can't just on the first day immediately cut it off and tell 12 million people you're on your own. Absolutely, Social Security is a Ponzi scheme. Absolutely, it should have never been passed. Absolutely, we have to get rid of it as soon as possible. And my first day in office, I would try to get an immediate opt out to where you no longer have to pay another dime to Social Security again for the rest of your life. However, for the people who for 40 years were forced to pay into a system, I would sell off whatever I had to, government properties such as downtown post offices, parks, whatever, which would do much better in the hands of a private person, to pay them. Because the way I look at it is if you are 60, 70 years old, if you paid into Social Security for 40, 50 years, however much money, however long you did, unlike what the government says, no, there is no lockbox. Your money was not sitting there. Instead, your money was going to fund some of these other things. So tell you what, some of these other government properties, that's yours. You paid for them. We're just going to give what you rightfully own back to you. With the drug laws, and absolutely, we need to legalize all drugs. In fact, on one radio show that I was on in the 90s, they asked me, how many drugs would you legalize? Just marijuana, or would you legalize heroin and cocaine? And my response was, well, it depends on how much crime you want to get rid of. If you want to get rid of just a little bit of crime, okay, legalize marijuana. If you want to get rid of a lot of crime, a lot of organized crime, legalize all of them. So absolutely, we need to legalize all of them. However, we can only do what the people support us in. And I'm fine with, okay, first month in office, let's just legalize marijuana until people can see that everything's going to be okay. In fact, I as you know, I live in Greenville, South Carolina. I live in the South. We didn't have Sunday alcohol sales, which I didn't realize when we moved here. And so the city finally legalized alcohol on Sundays, where you could go to the store and buy it. Now, of course, very limited. Well, you can only actually buy it in a restaurant. You couldn't go to the liquor store and buy it, but you could go to a restaurant and buy a drink. And I remember somebody wrote a letter to the newspaper saying, mark my word, within the next year, we're going to see dead bodies laying in the street. And the guy was serious. And and I wanted to write a letter a year later saying, notice, no dead bodies in the street. But if people need to see, okay, there's no dead bodies in the street on the first month from marijuana, so we can move on, that's fine with me, because I realize that libertarians, we are very much ahead of our time. And not to get too far off the topic, but that's one thing that's been frustrating is, we were saying 30, 40 years ago, hey, they're going to start taxing junk food. And everybody was like, oh, you're such extremists. Oh, you're so radical. That would never happen. Well, not only did states start taxing junk food, but then you got Mayor Bloomberg, who's actually outlawing some junk food in the form of you can't drink large sodas. So pretty much we've been right on things. And I think we would be right on heroin, but we can only do what the people will support us in doing, or we will get thrown out of office. And then what good will we be? It's much better to incrementally get liberty by, for instance, with Social Security, not cut grandma off on day one, incrementally get liberty than to never get liberty. And again, I'm not saying we need to do that by not being true to our party platform. I'm not saying that we need to keep the IRS and we need to keep troops stationed around the world. What I'm saying is we need to stick to our platform of legalizing drugs and getting rid of Social Security, but you can't do that in 24 hours. You need to do that step by step. And one more point, by the way, as far as getting people to, like how much could I do? With Social Security, I would like to point out, even though I wouldn't throw grandma out on the street, transferring money would stop. I do not think it is right to take money away from some people and give it to other people. In fact, that's exactly against our platform. So what I would do is, like I said, pay them off with the government assets that their money went to buy. But immediately on day one, try to stop people from having to pay one more penny into Social Security.
What are President Trump's best and worst executive accomplishments as president?
Well, I do admit that I don't think it's a coincidence that we've had a faster economic recovery under him than under Obama. I've heard many people from Obama who say, oh, well, the reason we're seeing prosperity now is because of what Obama did 8 years ago. It just took 8 years for them to work. It's like, no, no. I do believe that he did get rid of some legislation, some regulation that increased business, but at a very high cost. If you look at the deficit, which he said he was going to get rid of the deficit, it's only gotten bigger. Our deficit's increasing, our debt's increasing. So just like every other Republican, he's just really good at spending money. And that has got to stop. That is the worst part of really any administration, is spending other people's money. Because first of all, money is power. Anytime you take money away from individuals and you spend it, the government spends it. But by you, I mean the government, you as president. Anytime the government spends it, now you are the one who is spending money. You're the one in power of those dollars. You're the one choosing the winners over the losers, not individuals. So individuals need to spend their own money. Nothing works better than the free market. So while Trump got rid of regulations, he really didn't help the free market per se, because we're still getting way too much money in the government.
Was that both his best and his worst accomplishments? Did you touch on both?
Oh gosh, let me think about. I've never really thought about what his worst accomplishments are. I mean, to me, for worst accomplishments, you would have to look at deaths. So I would say his overseas military involvement which would be bringing about more deaths, would probably be the worst. Because yes, taking away people's money is bad, but causing deaths, that's even worse. So he promised he said, yes, we're going to take the troops out of Iraq. Yes, we're bringing the troops home. But what he doesn't say is, oh, guess what? We're replacing them with drones. We've still got a military presence. So no, we need to bring all of the troops home. And so I would say that would be his worst, is leaving the troops around the world for, first of all, people to give people a reason to hate us, and just for the death that war gives us. So I would say his worst accomplishment would be not following through and bringing the troops home as he promised. The best, I would say, probably getting rid of the regulations that he did get rid of. I mean, it's small compared to what a libertarian would get rid of, but hey, getting rid of some is better than getting rid of none.
So this next question, I think you've already touched on this, but if you want to get into it more, you can. Tell us what you would do in your first 100 days of office if elected president.
In my first 100 days, I would immediately, as I said, pardon everybody, get everybody out who I could possibly get out of prison, who shouldn't be there for nonviolent crimes. I would immediately work to dismantle the Department of Education. We've had the Department of Education for 40 years. It's not doing us any good. In fact, education has gone downhill. Education needs to be at the local level. It needs to be in charge of teachers and parents, not the government. So get that out of the federal government. I would also start bringing the troops home day one. Can't get them all home on the first day, but start bringing them home on day one. And that's something I can do as president. I would also work to immediately stop the money transfer with Social Security. It is a Ponzi scheme. It is not fair. We need to get rid of it. I'm trying to think of, that's probably a full day's work right there for 100 days, getting a start. Oh, the last thing I would tell all of my cabinet members, okay, you find ways to cut money in your department. And I would tell Congress, I'm not signing any bill that creates a deficit. Every budget you bring me needs to be a balanced budget. And a lot of people who support Reagan, when I point out that government got bigger under Reagan every year, they say, well, but Congress never gave them a balanced budget. Well, but here's the thing. Ronald Reagan never pushed back. He never said, no, this isn't good enough. Take it back, come up with another one, bring it back to me. He didn't even do that one time. If they brought me 10 bills that were not balanced, I would send all 10 back and say, no, it's not balanced yet. You need to bring me one that's balanced. So I would immediately look for ways to start cutting government, cut it everywhere I can. And, we talk about, sometimes people ask, well, what would you get rid of in the government? I think a better question is, what would you keep? What would you keep? As far as I'm concerned, the government should only be doing police, courts, and military. Police is at a local level, with the exception of the Supreme Court. That's at a local level. I'd be in charge of military, bring them home, and let's get rid of everything else and just start dismantling wherever we can. But with the caveat that if we look, some things are just in the way, making things worse. It's money we're throwing away, like the Department of Education. That's not helping anybody. Get rid of that. Something like Social Security, yes, it's a fraudulent system. It's inefficient. It's immoral. But there are people who are dependent on the money. So I'm not going to say, okay, immediately stop handing that money out. I'm going to say, okay, people will immediately stop having to pay in. And one other point, by the way, on this welfare stuff is I agree with Harry Brown that we need to get rid of corporate welfare before we even begin to worry about individual welfare. We got to get rid of corporate welfare. We got to start taking the power away from these corporations. Unfortunately, there are so many other people who are misguided, who look at corporations as evil and, let's use government to help us get rid of these evil corporations. No, the reason these corporations are evil is because they're getting their power from government. If they didn't have the government giving them power, giving them money, they wouldn't be able to do what they're doing. And I'd like to use a quote and say that, an evil person like Charles Manson is really awful, but you take an evil person like Hitler and give them the power of government, and now you've got something really horrific. So what we need to do is we need to stop giving power to people and let the individuals make their own decisions.
What you said about Reagan reminds me of a story I heard, which is I heard Stephen Moore, who's currently an advisor to President Trump, but formerly headed the Club for Growth, and he
Yes.
Was a editor for the Wall Street Journal, I believe.
Yep.
He said he was in the room as kind of an intern when President Reagan was considering taxes, and the Speaker of the House and the leader of the Senate came to him and said, "Well, President Reagan, I know you wanted to lower taxes, but we're looking at the budget, and turns out we need to raise taxes. So you're going to need to agree to this." And his advisors, his Treasury Secretary, etc., looked at him and he said, "Yeah, President, we need to raise taxes." And and apparently Reagan, he just thought for like a minute, and everyone was staring at him. And the president was like, "No, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to raise taxes." And Stephen Moore was sitting around the side. He was like an intern at the time. He stood up and cheered. He was like, "Yes!" And then everyone stared at him because interns were supposed to be like never seen or heard and just blend into the background. But so Reagan was apparently able to push back on taxes, but not so much on spending.
Well, and see, that's the problem, is that Reagan was right. And Art Laffer was right. Yeah, if you decrease taxes, you're going to give people an incentive to work more. And if they make more money, even though their rate has gone down, they're going to be paying more in taxes. So absolutely. And so instead of saying, okay, taxes are cut, let's cut spending, it was like, yippee, look at all this extra money. So Republicans. And let me point out, because a lot of people get really upset with Republicans, I'd like to distinguish, and I did this on my campaign trail. And by the way, when I ran for VP, my stump speech was why Republican politicians keep selling out freedom. I always make a distinction between the many fine Republican voters who often want smaller government and the politicians, the Republican politicians who are lying to them, who are saying they are giving them smaller government when they're giving them larger government. So, and by the way, I've seen, I like your story about Stephen Moore. I've seen him on TV many times. And I was glad to hear that he would be helping Trump in the beginning, although that didn't last long, but then he was back, and I don't know. But
yeah, he kind of did an about face, because Stephen Moore, I've seen him give speeches about how pro-immigration he was, and then all of a sudden, and pro-free trade, and then all of a sudden he's Trump's advisor, and he's against those things, which is really weird.
And I'm not saying that Stephen Moore goes far enough, okay? But let me just say, out of the Republicans that we see advising, he's one of the better guys. So, it was that would make sense that that's what happened. So I was really glad to hear that that's that he was doing that.
Yeah. Just to be clear, my tax raises story was about Reagan rather than Trump. But yeah.
No, I know.
Anyway, the next question: how would a libertarian president have handled the coronavirus?
A lot. First of all, a lot differently. First of all, we would not put people under house arrest. We would not say you have to stay home. Secondly, we would have gotten the FDA out of the way so that people could be tested. One of the biggest problems is we didn't know who needed to stay home and who could go out safely because we didn't have the testing. So once again, government will, put the roadblock up and say, okay, we are, we're not going to approve all these tests. And then they say, oh, well, we haven't been tested, so y'all have to stay home. If people had gotten tested from the start, we would have known who is safe to be out there and who isn't. And yes, I know we didn't have the antibodies test right away, but we would have known who had the disease and who didn't. One thing that really frustrated me the most was when Trump said, and this is something I actually saw him, and I usually don't watch his press conferences from start to end. They're too long and too boring, and you don't get much out of them anyway. But I just happened to catch him when he said, only get testing if you have the symptoms. If you don't have the symptoms, no need to get tested. And I wanted to throw something at the TV because at least 60 and as many as 80% of the people with coronavirus do not have symptoms. So you can think that you're fine and then go out and infect a bunch of people. So you don't just say test if you have symptoms. How about let's test everybody? That's what other countries did, and they were able to slow it down. So should have done an Emergency Powers Act to tell the FDA, you don't have to test for efficacy. Go ahead and test for safety. Let everybody get tested. And then only the people who were vulnerable or who were sick would have had to have stayed home. We could have left our economy going on just fine. And I'd like to point out, by the way, that Sweden, yes, they had deaths, but it's not like they're over there dropping like flies and we're all safe. No, we have a lot of deaths. Sweden has had deaths, and yet the stores remained open, the schools remained open, the restaurants remained open, and they got through it.
So this next question, probably one you haven't heard before. We're broadcasting on a gaming website. Tell me about your hobbies. Do you play any video games or board games or card games?
Okay, yeah, I'm going to really embarrass myself here. When was this? It would have been what? Maybe the mid 90s, late 90s. There was a game called Croc on PlayStation, which I absolutely loved. I was a grown-up at the time in my 30s, and I introduced my sister to it. We were visiting my mom in another state, and we were up all night playing Croc. So I do understand the allure of video games, but that's about the extent of my video games. I loved Tetris and Bubble Spinner. And in fact, I took a screenshot of my very high score in Bubble Spinner. I was very proud of that. But no, my hobbies tend not to be electronic. My hobbies tend to be, well, first of all, I've always exercised pretty much my entire adult life. Unfortunately, I had knee injury, I've had knee surgery, I've had shoulder surgery, probably because I have remained active as an adult. The number one sport that I've played as an adult, believe it or not, is hockey. First roller hockey and then ice hockey. In fact, it was after the '96 campaign that I was the only woman in the over 40 hockey league. Now, it was like pickup games. It wasn't like, we went and played Raleigh or, Raleigh, North Carolina or anything like that. It was just, people out there playing hockey. And I'd like to point out, it was every Wednesday night at 10 o'clock at night. So that's how much I loved playing, that I was out there. I wouldn't get home till close to midnight playing hockey. But I also enjoy running. And lately, I've been doing more running and lifting weights, although they closed the gyms in my state. Although I would like to point out, the governor said, okay, we're closing the gyms down. at 5 o'clock tonight, all the gyms have to be closed. And they closed all the gyms in the entire state. I didn't leave my gym until 3:30 that day. I was there to the last possible minute working out with my personal trainer. And I can Romanian deadlift 100 pounds, eight reps of 100 pounds. So I'm proud of that. And I garden. I mentioned, my composting and my gardening. And I have kids. And I have my first grandson, who will be 2 years old this August. When you're running for president, there's not a whole lot of time for hobbies.
Interesting. Yeah. So all the gyms closed here in Pennsylvania too, and I was one of the ones that scrambled to build a home gym. So I have a home gym now that I've been using the last few weeks. So I don't completely wither away.
Yeah, and I do have free weights, and I even have like some video, but that's just boring. Yeah.
Yeah, I think some people are using like Zoom for their personal training now, but
Yes.
it's definitely less fun than when you can interact with someone face to face. So next question, what are your campaign's target demographics? Would your outreach lean more conservative, liberal, or in some other direction?
Well, independents are the largest growth. If you look at, well, first of all, let me correct a misperception that a lot of people have. A lot of people think that we take mostly from the right. Actually, research shows, and of course, it depends on which state, which race, of course. But in general, libertarians tend to take from the left just as much as they take from the right. But most people are independents. Either they're independents or they don't vote at all. So I strongly believe we need to go after the, what they call the low-hanging fruit. There are something like 40 to 45 million libertarians out there, let me say libertarian-leaning people. Either they haven't heard of the party, or they've heard things like with Libertarian Party, they're the ones that want to legalize heroin, or they've heard, the Libertarian Party, you have to be pro-choice to join them. And I want to go after them and explain how no, if you want smaller government, you belong here. And I know that Lincoln Chafee received a lot of flack. A lot of people were saying he wasn't libertarian enough. And I'd like to point out, I think definitely Lincoln Chafee belongs in our party because I think he is more libertarian than he is Democrat or Republican. But I do agree, I don't think he was ready to be our standard bearer. I think if you're going to be the presidential nominee, I think that you do need to have a thorough understanding of libertarianism, and not only just why you came to the party, but why everybody else. Because here's the thing, if you put 10 people, well, let me correct that, 10 libertarians, you put 10 libertarians in a room, ask them, why did you join the party? You're going to get 10 different reasons. So you have to know, you can't just know your pet reason why you joined. It can't just be like, well, you don't like the FDA, so you're going to talk about just the FDA. No, you have to understand the entire medical process, or you have to understand the environment as well as Social Security, as well as bringing the troops home, as well as foreign policy, as well as, all these other things. You have to basically speak to what other people are talking about. So my demographics are going to be libertarian-leaning people who just don't know that the Libertarian Party is a good home for them. And that does tend to be younger people. A lot of younger people are, they're just naturally more socially tolerant. They believe in gay marriage. In fact, their reaction is kind of like, what? You mean people don't think gays should get married? That doesn't even make sense. So they tend to be very tolerant of things like that. And yet they're still fine with owning a gun. Again, they look at it as, well, of course you should be able to own a gun. You can get married if you're gay, right? So definitely younger people, definitely libertarian-leaning people.
As president, what is the proper constitutional role of executive orders, and what would you accomplish with executive orders?
I realize this can be a controversial point, because I know some libertarians say they're not constitutional, so we need to get rid of them. Okay, that's the end result. But here's the thing: what if I, as president, can get rid of other unconstitutional executive orders or other unconstitutional things in government with an executive order first? So I would actually use the executive order to get rid of anything unconstitutional that I can. And then before I leave office, okay, fine, then we'll get you rid of executive orders. But I don't see any reason to not use those to get rid of the unconstitutional stuff first before you get rid of them. Because, yeah, that is too powerful of a tool to leave lying around for future presidents. So you want to get rid of that before the next guy gets in office. Absolutely.
What would you do about climate change?
Climate change. First of all, educate people that the most if you look at well, let me back up a minute. First of all, I'm not going to get into the argument of how do we have climate change. I'm not going to get into the argument of is it man-made or is it not man-made, because we're here now. The question is, what do we do from here on out? So I think a major thing is to explain to people that if you have more government, you've got less pollution. And, we know that some of this pollution can cause greenhouse gases and all that. Also, as I said, I'd leave the competition open for nuclear power. I would stop wasting government money on, all these wind and solar powers that just don't seem to be sustainable. Because here's the thing: if they really worked, if they really had a good return on investment, then private companies would be beating down the doors to start these companies. The only reason that the government has to put money in is because they're not a viable option. So I would move to nuclear power, which I would like to point out, nuclear power is much cleaner than coal and pretty much anything else we have. So anybody who's for the environment, who's against global warming, needs to be for nuclear power.
What kind of judges would you appoint? So for the federal district court, the circuit courts, and the U.S. Supreme Court, what do you look for in a judge? And do you have a short list for the U.S. Supreme Court?
I don't have any specific names, but somebody who understands the Constitution. I wouldn't look for somebody on specific issues. I would look at, do you believe in the basic Constitution, and would you uphold the Constitution? I'm assuming
Sorry about that. I was typing the chat. I try to mute myself when I type the chat.
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say this kind of sounded like the lightning round to me. So that's
yeah. No, that's fine. You can take as long or as short as you want for any of these questions. How should we handle the debt crisis?
The debt?
The debt and the deficit.
Oh, yeah. Immediately stop the spending. One thing, when you're digging yourself into a hole, the first thing you need to do is stop digging. So stop digging, stop spending. Again, I would tell Congress, I'm not going to sign a bill unless it's balanced. And let's just get government out of everything we can. And again, you look at all the money wasted going to the Department of Education. And we've got, so many other departments that shouldn't even be there. And worse yet, we've got departments that, basically take money from states or the people in the states and then bribe the states to do things to have them get their money back. So the government needs to stop being an expensive middleman. And also bringing home the troops would save a heck of a lot of money.
The Republicans and Democrats have a large pool to tap to fill the executive branch for the appointees. How would you staff your departments? Do you have anyone in particular in mind for the cabinet level and near that level?
No, but they would be libertarians. Back in, I think it was 1993, I was part of, well, they jokingly, we jokingly referred to ourselves as the Atlanta Cabal, but we got together and came up with a proposal for the National Party. And one of those things was to come up with a list of, what we call shadow cabinet. And that was really a lot of fun to do. We came up with, for instance, Tucker, who had written about the homeless for Department of Housing, and right on down the line. I have not gotten that far with a presidential campaign, and you're actually the first person to have asked me that. But I can guarantee you, I would probably go to the Libertarian Party first, go to Cato second, go to some of these other libertarian think tanks third, and look for the people who have written extensively and who understand that government is not going to solve the problem, that government creates the problem.
So I have a question to ask all the candidates that, which is, what would be your foreign policy as president? I think you've touched a lot on military policy. Do you want to expand on that, on foreign policy in general, or do you feel you've already answered that?
Well, let me just add that I would tell other countries, hey, here's the good news. We're going to stop being the world's policeman. So we're not going to be, our troops are no longer going to be on your property. We're no longer going to tell you what you can do. Bad news is you're going to be paying your own bills. Also, I would follow that up with, but here's the good news. We are going to trade peacefully. So I'm not going to have any tariffs or any sanctions. If my citizens want to trade with yours, great, we'll be there. We'll do that.
If you receive the Libertarian Party nomination, do you have a preference for your running mate? I think you touched on this earlier. You said you might give like a list of like 5 people.
Right.
Are you going to name names or not at this point?
Well, let me just say, the only name I feel comfortable naming right now is Ken Armstrong, only because he was a presidential candidate, and I was with him in many debates, so I've heard him answer many questions, and I believe he would be a good candidate, okay? So he would definitely be on my short list because I know him, and I've seen him perform, and I think he's great. I don't know any of the other candidates as well because I've been paying attention to the presidential campaign, not the vice presidential race. So, and I know there's a lot of support for Larry Sharpe. My question to Larry Sharpe would be, how do your views agree or disagree with Jim Gray's views? If he agrees with Jim Gray, for instance, that we need to have an IRS, that we need to have an income tax, that the federal government needs to be involved, or at least the government needs to be involved in education, and that there was some, and that we need to keep troops stationed around the world, then I would say, no, I need somebody who's going to stick to the platform closer to what I believe. If, however, he says, oh no, I'm only running on that because that's what Jim Gray believes, but no, I think we shouldn't have an income tax. I think we should bring our troops home, then that would be fine. But I just don't know his views separate from Jim Gray's, because what a lot of people don't realize is as vice president, your job is to basically go around and spread the presidential message. And that's why it was so easy for me to be Harry Brown's vice presidential nominee, because I agreed with Harry. I loved Harry Brown's candidacy because he was uncompromising. He didn't sell out liberty. He did not sacrifice the platform. He agreed in liberty right down the line, but he was able to explain it in a practical way that Americans would understand. And by the way, one of the ways that I love that he would explain it is he would ask people, and I guess I would do this too if I were the candidate, because I think it's very I think it's very compelling, is to ask people, okay, imagine the IRS did not, and see, got to get rid of the IRS. Imagine the IRS didn't take money out of your paycheck every week. what would you do every week? Maybe go to an extra restaurant, maybe do this, do that. Or he would say, imagine saving up your money. Imagine if you've gone a whole year and you've got an extra $12,000. What would you do with that 12,000? Take a nice vacation, maybe send your kids to college. Think about all the things you could do if you didn't have to give that money to the federal government. So I liked his practical and principled approach. So I would want any candidate to be, practical enough and principled enough.
If you lost the LP nomination,
Oh, I'm sorry for that noise.
if you lost the LP nomination, would you accept the nomination for vice president?
It would depend who it's for. Um, Right, and I don't want to make any formal announcements. Right now, I'm running for the presidential nomination. Right now, I believe that I would be the best candidate because I am a lifelong libertarian. I understand the libertarian platform, and I understand all the reasons to be libertarians. I've done 40 years of reading. I can't tell you how many Cato books and how many Cato papers I've read, and I think better than anybody else, I could explain to the American, like whatever they threw at me as far as what about free trade or fair trade or this or that? I would have an answer for it. In fact, somebody once asked me a question about Bureau of Land Management, and I had a question for that too. So I believe that I'm the best candidate, and I think that I can better explain the party platform. That being said, if I were to lose to Justin Amash, I would consider being the VP candidate, just because if we had somebody who recently left, it was almost a year ago, but that's fairly recently, considering I've been in the movement for 40 years. I would want to see somebody like myself as the VP nominee, somebody to balance that out, somebody who is a diehard libertarian, somebody who would give the libertarian message. So I would do that more to balance out the ticket, to hopefully steer the ticket more libertarian. But I don't know what his plans are. I hope if he gets the nomination, he doesn't bring in some outsider who doesn't understand the platform or agree with it 100%. But like I said, right now, I'm just going after the nomination because I think I would be the best person.
So you touched on this your last question. What are a few of your favorite libertarian books?
Oh, geez. Oh, I just read, let me just include one that I just read, which is Michael Tanner's The Inclusive Society. And I also recently read, and I don't know that this would be called a libertarian book, but it's a great explanation of the healthcare system and the problem. It's called The Cure That Works. Again, it's not like one of these Cato books, but I still recommend it, The Cure That Works. And he talks about Singapore. As far as, I would have to put, I don't know if you call this a libertarian book, but I would put Atlas Shrugged at the top of the list because that book was just instrumental in, like, I had so many dots that needed connecting that when I read that book, and for instance, I remember one passage where they were talking about how we don't want to invent anything new, because we don't want competition, and how, oh yeah, well, we want that with books too, because, oh yeah, some author was friends with whatever politician. And it just really drove home how ludicrous the system we have is. So if you count Atlas Shrugged, but I would, other than that, I would have to just go back through all the books I've thought about. But David Bergland's Libertarianism in One Lesson, definitely that goes at the top.
So which former U.S. president, former or current, I guess, which U.S. president did you admire the most, and why?
I would have to say Thomas Jefferson. I think he's beloved by most libertarians, and probably for the same reasons. He's the one who came up with, hey, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and that Americans should be free to pursue those. So,
What politician did you admire the most, living or dead?
um, I guess Thomas Jefferson. He would be a politician, right?
Okay. Um, if you could change one government policy, what would it be? Just one.
Oh wow. I guess the income tax.
So you would get rid of the income tax? That would be okay.
Uh,
Um,
yeah, put power back to the people. Let them. People will spend their own money much better than bureaucrats will.
do you have any endorsements of your presidential campaign that you're proud of and want to highlight?
Oh, people have endorsed me in the past.
Well, for this presidential campaign.
We have not really gone after endorsements, so um, I I would have to go back and look. Uh, and also, I've had some people. I'm not sure if they want me to public. Yeah, well, an endorsement by definition is public. I would say. I mean, I'm most proud that I have Steve Dasbach running my campaign because, like I said, he was national chair, executive director. He's been on the LNC, and by the way, he got the Best Libertarian of the Decade award from Indiana. So this guy is just awesome. And I even though I said I've never thought of running for the LNC, I mean, for a while I thought, well, I've been vice president. I was a vice presidential candidate. I wonder if I could run for national chair or something like that. Some kind of leadership role. After seeing Steve Dasbach in action, I realized no, he is. I just don't have enough words to tell you how amazing he is in organization and getting things done, and just being so behind the scenes organized. It's just awesome.
Of the prior Libertarian Party presidential campaigns, which campaign most closely resembles the campaign you want to run?
Oh, that's easy. Harry Brown. Harry Brown, in the 96 campaign. He ran again in 2000. And in 2000, they decided that they would go after votes and not membership. And unfortunately, they fell short for both. So I think you need to have membership, if not as the most important goal, because like I said, yes, we need ballot access, we need votes in some states. But membership, he went after membership, and he never sold out the libertarian principle, but he was able to explain it in a practical way. And a lot of people listened to him and said, that makes a lot of sense. And that's what I want people to say when they hear me, is they say, wow, that makes a lot of sense. I never thought about it that way. And one of the biggest compliments I've gotten from people is when they say, gosh, now, when I read a news article, I just read it differently because I never thought about all these things that you've been mentioning. So they're better at reading between the lines.
So I have two questions for you that are somewhat related, and I'm going to give you both questions before you answer, because sometimes I give one question and then
Okay.
sort of people answer the other question.
Okay.
So the first is, why are you the best candidate to represent the libertarian brand? And the second is, why are you the best candidate to build the Libertarian Party?
Okay. And yes, those are related. And I think it's everything that I've just already listed, because I refuse to sell out one single sentence, one single plank of the libertarian platform. But rather than going around and saying, well, it's my money, it's my body, I should be able to do what I want, I'm going around and I can explain to other people why they need to join. After all, I have a background in sales. As I mentioned earlier, I sold for IBM. When I started my own company doing computer software, I realized that I couldn't talk about why it benefited me, why they needed to use my services. I needed to explain why it benefited them. So definitely, I would say it's the fact that I can actually put libertarian principles in understandable, bite-sized pieces of why people should be excited about our party. And as far as growing the party, the membership, again, it's the same reason, because so many people out there think, oh, well, I can't join the party because um, I can't pass this litmus test. I'm not good enough for the party, or I'm pro-life, so I can't be a part of the party. So I think we need to get the message out there. If you want much smaller government, we're the only party out there. And once people become aware of our ideas and they talk to different people, then they start being won over for other ideas that maybe they're not libertarian in the beginning.
Have you spoken with policy experts at libertarian think tanks? And do you have policy experts advising your campaign?
I do not have policy experts on my campaign, which I think says a lot for the success I've had, because I've done this well. As I mentioned, I came in second only to Amash. When, and what's important about this race is this is the first time it was only limited to delegates, because it's the delegates who are going to choose the nominee, not some of these people who aren't even party members. So according to the delegates, I'm coming in a pretty close second to Justin Amash, somebody with great name recognition. So the fact that I've been able to do as much as I've done without any policy experts, I think speaks worlds about my talent for doing that. And once I have a campaign, once I have the nomination, now, yes, I can get all of these people who are, and I've actually spoken to some people, I won't name names, I've spoken to some people who are supporting other candidates who said, absolutely, if you win the nomination, I'm going to come over and I'm going to actually start, I would love to advise you if you get the nomination. And I would say that in the VP race, I was in contact with Michael Tanner quite a bit. Michael is at the Cato Institute, been there for a long time, and his issues are mainly domestic, so healthcare, Social Security, welfare, and those things. Oh, and since we're kind of on the topic of experts here, this is something that here's exclusive to your show that I've never mentioned on any other show or debate, which is I was honored by being, basically I flew with Milton Friedman, and this would have been 1980. I flew with Milton Friedman on a private jet from California to Texas, and it was a pretty awesome experience. So.
If you receive the nomination, will you campaign full-time for the general election, or will you be balancing the campaigning out with your election job or your consultant?
So I would not be doing consulting. I've got a partner for that. So that would be to the side. As far as now, I do teach the and I'm kind of surprised that, well, I hate to say this because I've got like one of the best bosses ever, but the only reason I've been able to campaign is that my boss and the scheduler in the department at Clemson have worked around my schedule, and I've only got Tuesday, Thursday evening classes, and that's it. And then I'm teaching an online class in the summer, but right now I don't have a job. I check my email every day at Clemson just to see if there's any student emergencies, but basically I don't have to teach during the summer at all. I'm going to teach just one section in July, and it's an online class, so virtually full time. And it depends on how big. If the campaign is big enough in the fall, I can even have somebody else teach my class. So, but I've been doing this. As I said, I've been going to, from January to March every week. I was going to 2 or 3 different states. So if you saw me on the stage, I don't think you would know what my schedule was compared to people who were campaigning full time. And you know what they say, if you want something done, give it to a busy person, because busy people somehow manage to get more done. So they've learned what they need to do to get stuff done.
I have heard that saying, and I have found that to be true.
Yes.
Um, so, what kind of campaign will you run? Um, will you travel a lot to speaking events, or will you run a media-focused campaign? And will you campaign with down-ticket libertarian candidates? And I know this may be changed by the whole COVID epidemic, but I guess answer if in two ways. If all of a sudden we find a cure in
Yeah.
August, and if we don't find a cure through the general election.
Yeah, well, first of all bets are off the table with the virus. We don't know what's going on with that. But absolutely, I would campaign with down ballot candidates. In fact, one of my, now, if you'd asked me for my best US House, you know, most memorable thing from when I ran for US House, it's when Nancy Lord came to Greenville to support me. And I had a great campaign manager. And by the way, I've had a lot of people ask me, well, how do we reach out to the LGBT community? Well, here's how I reached out to them. He and his partner, he was gay, he and his partner owned, excuse me, like one of those entertainment type newspaper things that, you know, that you pick up free around town. And he interviewed me for his newspaper. And he loved my campaign so much that he actually joined and became my campaign manager. So that really introduced me into the community. But he was well connected with the community, knew a lot of the bar owners. And Nancy Lord and I actually got on stage to a sold out crowd at a, I don't want to call it a bar, but bar, restaurant, you know, venue kind of place where music played. And we actually got, I don't know if it's called body surfing or what, you know, where the people pass you when you're on your back like they do at the concerts. Like there was a famous video with, I can't think, I'm getting, oh, Pearl Jam. Yeah. The singer Eddie Vedder of Pearl Jam, you know, they show the crowd passing him around. That's what they did to Nancy Lord and me back in the 90s. So absolutely, I would go out and campaign for the down ballot, because that's something that the presidential candidate should do. And the presidential candidate has more practice answering those kinds of questions. And I'd like to mention one other thing. The other thing I would do to help the down ballot candidates, other than just passing along names, is whatever research staff I have for my campaign, and keep in mind, I have a PhD, so research is important. I don't like going out and just making stuff up. So I would have researchers researching current events. So what we came up with for talking points, we would share at least with the U.S. House and Senate candidates, because those issues would be the same ones. So, but you have to balance. Here's the thing. You can reach more people online. You know, if I wanted to, after your interview, I could just interview with somebody else. So, of course, you could do more interviews online. But there's something about being in person, and especially if there's a candidate that's really making progress, and to have an in-person campaign rally, having the presidential candidate there might add more excitement. And my campaign has already talked about this, where we would prefer to go instead of the larger cities would be the smaller cities where we would get more press. You know, if you show up in, I don't know, Houston, Texas, for instance, you're not going to get a lot of coverage, media coverage, because that's a big city. They got a lot of stuff going on. So you go to the medium-sized cities where you would be like the headliner. And, you know, cities like that I'm from in Greenville. And Greenville has actually been very good, again, because we're a smaller city. When I ran for U.S. House, I was actually asked to be in the debate between the Liz Patterson was the U.S. Congresswoman at the time, and then Bob Inglis was challenging her along with me, and Bob ended up winning that race. But they were like, sure, come on stage. I was in the debate, the televised debate. they didn't think twice about it. And by the way, the Greenville News referred to me as the rose between two thorns because I was in the middle of coming up with reasonable answers while Bob Inglis and Liz Patterson were just throwing barbs at each other, where they were just kind of fighting each other. So it's towns like this size where you can get more bang for the buck because they don't have as many other things going on in the city to report on.
So for those in the audience who might not know, Nancy Lord was a vice presidential candidate before Dr. Jorgensen, and she, I think, under Moreau, is that right? In
Yeah,
90,
Angela Moreau, yep.
yeah, yeah.
Moreau
So we're
92.
talking two women vice presidential candidates, though you afterwards heard before that were crowd surfing. And the Libertarian Party also had the first electoral vote but for a woman who was many years before Geraldine Ferraro. We had Tony Nathan running for vice president under John Hospers in 1972, I believe.
Yeah, and isn't she the only woman still to have gotten an electoral vote?
Well, no, because Hillary Clinton got a bunch of electoral votes,
yeah,
and
that's
so did
right,
Geraldine Ferraro.
yeah.
But the only, yeah. So
Yeah, I guess I was looking more like she was the only one in the Libertarian Party who got the.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, obviously not the Democrat and Republican, yeah, but I think so far they're still the only ones to get an electoral vote in the party.
I'm not sure of that actually. I'd have to look into that. I actually I think you're right, but there were some faithless electors that went to various candidates. I think Ron Paul got a faithless elector vote, so I don't know whether you'd count that because he was not running as a Libertarian most recently, but as a Republican. But he was our candidate in 1988.
Right.
So will you remain in the Libertarian Party far in the future, whether you win or lose the nomination?
Oh, I'm still here 40 years later. In fact, last night, and this isn't to put Jim Gray down, okay? And I don't remember his numbers exactly, but he said, I've been in the party for 12 years and Larry Sharp's been in the party for 8 years or 12, whatever the numbers were. And I thought, well, that's interesting. You add both of the number of years they've each been in the party, add them together. I've actually been in the party longer. So as I mentioned, I voted for Ed Clark in 1980. I have voted for every presidential nominee since then. I've been a delegate, several times to national conventions. I'm not going anywhere. I don't see the Democrats and Republicans as a viable option at all. They're, once the libertarian philosophy becomes a part of you, it's hard to really leave that.
So that's the end of my prepared questions. I do have some questions from the audience, time permitting. We've already gone 2.5 hours, but if you have more time to talk, I'd like to ask you some of these questions, if that's okay.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm sorry, probably I could have given you shorter answers, but I thought, wow, we got 2 hours.
Oh, I have all the time in the world, so it doesn't matter to me. I did have one other candidate, Adam Kokesh, who had to leave real quick because he didn't understand the time constraints, but everyone else has been able to talk longer, which is great.
That's what you told me. Time is no object is kind of what you said, so yeah. I'm taking advantage of that.
Excellent. Okay, so the audience questions, some of them are from non-libertarians and might not be as generous as mine, but we'll see how you can answer more hard-hitting questions. The first is, how would you start to transition from being a world police power to becoming a neutral country without an active military throughout the world?
Do it. I guess maybe repeat the question. I mean, yeah, I would just do it. I guess maybe the question is, will the countries that we're leaving be able to police themselves? Is that the question, maybe?
I'm not sure. I'm just reading it to you as it is, but it seems to be about transition. So I guess he's skeptical that we could go from being a military power to a neutral power, and how do we go about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, the short answer is just do it. Of course, where do you come home from? Of course, we would come home from stable places first, like France, and work our way down. But here's the thing. the whole idea of being the world's policeman is to make the world safer, but we haven't seen a safer world. As I mentioned before with bin Laden, what happens is we go to other countries and other people see us as a threat. And also, a lot of Americans don't really stop to think, geez, how would I feel if, I don't know, armies, soldiers from Iran moved into my neighborhood and started policing my streets? We're so used to being the policeman of the world that we don't even think about it being done to us. And again, some of that thing, one of the questions that's kind of related to that is, well, isn't that isolationist? If you pull all your people home, isn't that isolationist? And no, because I would try to immediately replace that with trade. So yeah, we're taking our soldiers home, but hey, I'm going to take off the tariffs. Your people can freely trade with us.
Why isn't libertarianism happening anywhere if it's such a good system?
I would say because once people, and the framers of the Constitution said this, that once people realize that they can vote themselves power, they are going to do so. And any system you come up with, it's just going to start to be run by those people. Again, I urge anybody, go back and read Animal Farm. That's what we've got. So you've got, the leader in Ethiopia. You've got Saddam Hussein. You've got, whatever leaders around the world you want to look at. These people get to live in palaces, and they have a police state to keep, the subjects in line. So, and it's hard to overcome them. But what I would say is that's almost a challenge, saying that, well, it must not be the best idea or would be places. In other words, I'm taking the question and flipping it. So the real question, the underlying question seems to be that, well, it must not be good or it would be in more places. And I would say, if you look all around the globe, where we've had the most progress, where we've had the most inventions, where we've had the least pollution, where we've had the most human rights, are always where we have less government. People, there are always going to be evil people. Charles Manson was evil. Hitler was evil. Some people get the power of government and they use it against people. And I think if we can show, well, we have shown how much better off we are here, then maybe people will start demanding it. But if you've got a dictator as a leader, what can you do? That's really hard. And I would just urge that we get there, that we head back in the other direction before we get so far that we do have a dictator. And let me quickly add, a lot of people are looking at Trump as, oh, geez, is he going to leave office? Like maybe he's our new dictator. I think that's overblown. I think Trump will leave office happily after 8 years or 4 years, depending on the election. But if we continue down this road, yeah, eventually we will have a dictator. We need to stop that.
Do you think taxpayers should have to pay for abortions?
Absolutely not. That's an easy one. Absolutely not. Neither should nuns. I am appalled that we heard the story about the nuns having to jump through all of those hoops to not have to provide health care that paid for abortions. You should not, not only should you not have to pay for abortion, but you shouldn't be required to even offer insurance for it for whatever reason, religious or otherwise.
How do you feel about open borders immigration?
That we need to flip what we have. Right now, we're only letting a few people in, keeping most people out. We need to flip that, let other people in. And not just to help the people coming into our country, but to help our country. Because if you look at the statistics, when we get immigrants in this country, we actually come out ahead, both financially and pretty much every other which way. And I know that what the news media has been doing is they will parade, here's one person who is an immigrant excuse me, drunk driving or killed somebody or whatever. But the statistics clearly show that people who are born in another country who move to our country are far less likely to commit a crime than people who are born on American soil. So the thing about crime doesn't hold water, the thing about terrorism doesn't hold water, and the thing about finances. Uh, People who come in, uh, anybody with a high school education or more benefits the economy, and they benefit the economy more than those who come over with less than a high school education. And I might add, three of my grandparents are immigrants. So I'm the granddaughter of immigrants. And this is one of the ways that's made this country great, why we've got great innovation, and why we come up with so much, because we've got a large, diverse group of people who are hardworking, who are trying to make their lives better.
So I have another skeptical question for you, which is, libertarians are trying to build a movement. By the time the party actually has influence, will the damage already be irrevocably done by the socialists?
Gosh, I hope not. That's my short answer to that question. Can you repeat the whole question again?
Libertarians are trying to build a movement. By the time the party actually has influence, will the damage already be irrevocably done by the socialists?
Yeah, so I think we've all heard the thing about, if you look at the socialist platform of the 1920s, even though a socialist was never elected as president or into Congress until recently, that every one of the socialist planks, like Social Security and everything, has been imparted. Libertarians have been able to do that somewhat, in that we have had libertarians running for office who have changed the conversation of the other people running for office. And I know one thing, for instance, Bob Barr credits the libertarians from keeping him from being elected in Georgia, because basically of the drug laws, because libertarians were against, he was very much for the drug laws, and the libertarians got out there and campaigned against. So I'm an eternal optimist, and here's the one good thing about, and of course the virus has been just tragic, and I don't want to sound gleeful like some of these people in the media do. One good thing that has resulted from the tragedy is I have seen so many Americans, like look at the people up in Michigan and some of these other places, Texas, who are saying, what do you mean the government's telling me I can't go to work? What do you mean I have to stay, in my house under house arrest? So people are beginning to wake up to just how powerful the government is, and how we need to do something.
Okay, I'm going to rephrase this next question a little to make it a little bit less confrontational, but still the thrust of the question.
Well,
do you think if we legalize illicit drugs, would that open the door for big pharma to push those drugs, much like Coca-Cola pushes soda?
You don't have to, but can you read the antagonistic question?
Okay. Do you think that legalizing illicit drugs would open the door for big pharma to be able to further poison the world?
Okay. Well, obviously no. One thing, here's the thing. Here's my question to that person is, are you an alcoholic? Just because alcohol is legal, are you drunk all the time and unable to hold a job or anything like that? I mean, we've got alcohol that's legal, and Americans have shown that they're, for the most part, fairly responsible with alcohol. It's not like, oh, the whole world goes crazy and now all of us every night get drunk. That's not what happens. The people who take alcohol to an excess are a minority, and the same would happen. But here's my question is, and by the way, let me point out, it's big pharma that is trying to keep marijuana from being legal because they don't want to have to compete. So my answer also is, how do we know that drug use would actually go up? In fact, in some instances, when we legalize marijuana, if we look at teenagers, for instance, teenage use has gone down, because if it's illegal, where do you get your profits? By going out selling it on the street, selling it to high school kids, and so forth. You're not going to do that if it's legal. Again, you don't have alcohol store owners trying to sell gin on the playgrounds at the school or in the high school. So, yeah, I think I answered the question, but
Okay. Go ahead if you have
I
more.
would like to know if I did. It's hard to do. It's hard to do too when I can't see the person. But yeah, in fact, let's look at alcohol prohibition. If we look at how alcohol was used in the 20s versus how it was used, if we look at alcohol prohibition and then what it looked like after alcohol prohibition, we basically saw a very small increase generally, but there was a decrease in the hard use. So I would say that there's absolutely no reason to think that drugs would be any different from alcohol. And what we learned from alcohol prohibition is that people handled alcohol just as responsibly when it was illegal as when it was legal, that we did not see alcohol use spike up.
Okay.
And let me mention, Chuck, I think these are the first questions I'm getting from non-libertarians. So this is great practice. I did arrive at the right answer, although it took me 3 to get there.
Okay, my next one prefaced himself. So he says, so I have a really stupid question. Libertarians believe in property rights. What if all property rights owners of a country make it illegal to have drugs on their property? Would it keep drugs out of the country?
Well, I would say that question is like, what if green men from Mars land in our country and then they take over and they do whatever? I mean, the beauty of having property rights is that there are different people with different philosophies who make their own choices. So the chances that every single property owner is going to be against drugs is almost, the same chance as green Martians coming in from outer space. So I would suggest that having property ownership by individuals would increase diversity, not decrease it, just because so many people have so many different beliefs and ideas, whether it's religion, drugs, whatever.
And the final question from the chat, how would you punish or help a recovering crack addict or a withdrawing heroin addict if they start breaking laws which happened as a direct result of their dependency?
Okay, well, first of all, I would never punish for the actual use of the drug because I don't see that as a crime. As we say, if there's no victim, there's no crime. Actually, using a drug does not create a victim in anyone else. Now, once you go out and commit some other crime, such as burglary, absolutely you need to be held accountable. Now, there are different, let me just bring up, and let me also point out, first of all, this is a general libertarian question because this is something that the president wouldn't be involved with. This is a local question. But I can tell you, for instance, in Greenville, we had a mental health law passed, would be in the state, in which, let's say you committed a crime because you have a mental illness. Let's say because you're bipolar, you ended up breaking a bunch of stuff in the store, whereas you normally wouldn't have done that. And what they do is they say, okay, we're going to lessen the punishment if you go to treatment. If you get medication or whatever you need, and if you continue with therapy so this doesn't happen again, because the crime's already committed. So you've got two choices. You can either not treat the problem and let the person, serve jail time for 2 years, 5 years, whatever, and go commit the crime again, or you can bribe the person by saying, tell you what, if you go through all these steps, you'll still get punished, but the punishment will be less, and hopefully long term you will be a better citizen. But keep in mind that one of the problems of having drugs being illegal is that people resist going to drug treatment because, in order to go to drug treatment, you got to say, hey, I'm doing something that's illegal. And a lot of people will hide this from their family because they don't want to be turned into the cops.
Judge Gray talked about that a bit in his interview. There's a technical term for it. I forget what it is off the top of my head. It's like sidelining or sidestepping or somewhat like the justice system. And I'm sure those aren't the words. But that's interesting. Would the person also have to pay restitution to who they harm? In your example, if someone bipolar breaks a bunch of dishes in a store, would they pay restitution also? Or is this only a criminal thing?
Yeah, well, as much as possible. One of the problems that I have with the legal system, with the justice system, is that people often don't have to pay restitution. And, drugs or no drugs, alcohol or no alcohol. So I would rather have a system in which is more restitution oriented. I'd rather have somebody stole money from me. I'd rather them pay me back than, sit in jail for shorter and pay me back than to sit in jail for longer, because how is sitting in jail longer going to help me? Now, it's going to keep the person away from other people and prevent crimes from other people. But, restitution, our country just has not been good with restitution, period. So put it this way, I would not treat somebody who did it because of a mental illness or because of drugs differently because of it. So if somebody has to pay restitution without a mental illness or under the influence, then yes, the same rules should apply. However, I think there needs to be, and I hate to call it, but it's basically a bribe. Hey, you can get a shorter sentence if you go to treatment, and we make sure that this doesn't help, or that you're a productive citizen in the future, and this doesn't happen again, because part of the justice system, one is punishment. The other thing is to prevent future crimes, and a lot of times we look at preventing future crimes by just keeping them in jail where they can't commit future crimes. But we also need to look at it as, can we rehabilitate the person so that the person isn't as likely to commit crimes.
And I did remember the term. The technical term is diversion, where you
diversion. Yes, that's what it's called. It's because when they passed the mental health bill here in South Carolina, that's what they called it, diversion.
So that covers all of my pre-written questions and all the audience questions. Is there anything you want to add that we haven't talked about?
Well, I said it at the beginning, but let me mention my website is joj2020.com. That's joj2020.com. I'd love for you to check me out, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Well, thank you very much for sitting down and talking with me. I really appreciate it. And so for the folks out at home, we will be selecting our presidential candidate at the Libertarian National Convention, which as of this past weekend has been changed around a little bit. So there will be an online presidential portion, which will be Memorial Day weekend. And then we'll hold the rest of the convention in person. I believe it's scheduled for Orlando in mid-July. But that's just a few weeks from now. So good luck to you.
Thank you.
So for the people in the chat, I am going, as is the tradition with Twitch, I'm going to send you to another stream to continue viewing. And I will take this video and I will post this up on YouTube and advertise it around for libertarians, so you all can watch it later and find more about Joe Jorgensen, who is Oh wow, that raid didn't work. That's kind of weird. I'll raid someone else. That's okay. Um, so I really appreciate everyone watching. I really appreciate Dr. Jo Jorgensen for sitting down with me. And you can go to her website to learn more about her. And oh wait, I guess that raid did work. I don't understand. I'm sorry, the weird technical difficulties. But okay. Everyone have a great night. Great afternoon. Bye.
Thanks.
And